Okay, we seem to have got it. Good morning to everyone. Good morning to you here and good morning to you online. It's very, very, very nice to see you all here. My name is Monica Orechova. I'll be your presenter for today. One of those you will see for short periods of time, but quite often. I come here from not far away, actually. Center for Equality Advancement is located just across a few streets. So it wasn't a long way for me, but we have a lot of guests for whom it was quite a long way. And we will have some presenters online after lunch. So before we start, let's agree on some ground rules. So we'll have a few question and answer sessions. So if you can hold your questions for the allocated times, that would be great. But if you do happen to have a very pressing question, we will be using the old school raise your hand, and we'll try and see if we can squeeze a question here and there as well. For the online people, we will need you to put your questions in the chat box, and we will get to those in the allocated times, as I've said. Now, am I on the microphone? It's on. Okay, very good. Thank you. So the conference is called Fostering Caring Masculinities in Early Childhood Education and Primary Schools. And this is part of the project that we have been working on with quite a few partners. So I would like to list those partners and tell you the people that we've been working with, and you will see most of them while they will be presenting the project. So the coordinator for the project was DISENS, Institute for Education and Research in Germany. We also had Institute for Masculinity Research and Gender Studies in Austria. We have Peace Institute in Slovenia. Yeah. And we also, thank you. And we also had Istituto degli Innocenti from Italy and Center of Women's Studies and Policies in Bulgaria. So as you can see, quite a bit of Europe has been covered in this project. So before I go on with the welcoming speeches, we would like to thank our financing institutions. The project has been funded by the European Union, the Federal Ministry of the Republic of Austria of Social Affairs, Healthcare and Consumer Protection, the Federal Ministry of the Republic of Austria for Education, Science and Research, and the Federal Ministry for Family Affairs, Senior Citizens, Women and Youth in Germany. So now that we've got all of that out of the way, it is my great pleasure to present to you Virginia Alexeyevna, Director of the Center for Equality Advancement, who is the representative of our hosting institution. Virginia, take it away.
A little bit different sizes, sorry. Thank you. I think it's fine. Good morning and welcome everyone here in Vilnius at this room and those who are on the other side of the screen. As far as I know, we have quite a big number of registered participants from all the world. Might be a little bit difficult with time difference, but anyway, people are joining us and will, I hope, enjoy this fascinating day of the conference. So as Monica already mentioned, this conference is the final part of the big project, EcaRoM, Early Care and the Role of Men, and the goal of the project is to promote the change of gender stereotypes and expand the concept of masculinity in early childhood education paying attention to caring as one of the main human qualities. So it's waiting really interesting day. And at this conference, we and our partners, whom Monica already introduced, we will present results and achievements of the project. And also, we are going to have two keynote presentations on caring masculinity by Alice Cambor, director of the Institute for Men and Gender Issues in Graz, and Gary Barker, who is a leading global voice in engaging men and boys in advancing gender equality and positive masculinities. And keeping in mind that Gary is in Mexico now, so his presentation will be a little bit later due to the time difference. And a very insightful discussion on how to promote caring masculinities in early education and primary schools is waiting in this afternoon session today. So as Monica already mentioned, our very dear partners, so I would like to thank once again for this prolonged cooperation, actually with this consortium from 6 different European countries and 6 different institutions. We are implementing second big project. And I believe that this is just good continuation, but not of the end of our cooperation. So we know who are already sponsors of this project and this event, but also I would like to thank European Institute for Gender Equality, or EIGE as we call in short version, for also very long-term cooperation we have, and also for the premises we are holding this conference. So thank you very much. And last but not least, I would also like to thank my team of the Center for Quality Advancement for its hard work to prepare, to organize this conference. And once again, I wish you and us all very interesting and fruitful day and interesting conference today. Thank you.
And so, as Virginia has mentioned, we have been kindly welcomed by the European Institute for Gender Equality, and therefore I would like to say a few words. Dennis van der Weer, Head of Knowledge Management and Communications at the Institute. Please, Dennis.
Thank you very much for the kind words before. For us, of course, it's a pleasure that we finally, after so long time, we can receive visitors. This building has been rather empty for quite a bit. We're upstairs here, the European Institute for Gender Equality, almost 50 to 55 people working here, one of the smaller EU agencies promoting equality between women and men in all their diversity. My director, Colleen Schele, couldn't be here today, but she sends the greetings. And we think, also having dived a little bit into your program, that you have a very important topic. And I say that also based on some of the work and insights we have been doing. You may know that every year we launch the so-called Gender Equality Index, where we basically look at how member states do on scoring on gender equality. And we focus on different aspects. And of course, we looked at the impact of the pandemic on men and women in the European Union. And I looked a little bit deeper into some of the findings we had on young people and boys and girls. And we found that the pandemic aggravated social inequalities in the field of education because of school closures and the shift to online teaching. And we saw that adolescent boys are more likely than girls to be affected by early school leaving. And the share of young people neither in education nor in employment has increased, with particularly young boys being the most affected. We also saw that, of course, not only in education young people were affected by the pandemic, but also when it comes to mental health. Evidence from some of the EU member states, in fact, shows that there is an increase in suicide among young people, particularly boys, during the pandemic. So I'm sure that in your program today, and you are much more on an expert level here than I am, that these figures resonate with you and that you will discuss these issues. Now, zooming out a little bit on the topic of your conference today, I think it's also very important that there are some interesting developments when it comes to the policy level, on European level, to look in the role of men and boys in gender equality policies more broadly. I just came back with our director from Strasbourg, where we attended a meeting of the Gender Equality Commission. And they are doing quite some interesting work. They developed a study on the place of men and boys in gender equality policies. And this is quite an interesting study that I recommend you to read, looking into quite a number of aspects. And similarly, as Sweden will take over the presidency of the European Union in January for 6 months, they, as part of their so-called presidency program, have also prioritized within their gender equality work the role of boys and men. So I quote from their program that they want to focus on effective measures to prevent both the causes, use and reoccurrence of violence against women. And under their presidency, they would like to look closer and broader and more constructive involvement of men and boys and breaking with the notion of gender norms, etc. So I think on a policy level, these developments are very important for our work as an institute, but also, I guess, for your work. And the very last thing that I would like to mention is next week on the 2nd of, well, it's already this week, the 2nd of December, on Friday, the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe will also release a report on the role of men and boys in gender equality policies. So I think the overall sort of wind and the overall context in which you will discuss today, I think you have an important overall policy framework, at least attempts. We from our side follow your work and those of others quite a bit. I will pop in and out a little bit during the day, cannot stay all day, but thanks a lot for being here, to come from far, and I wish you a very good discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dennis. And now to wrap up our welcome speeches, we have a video speech from Lisa Paus, the Federal Minister for Family Affairs, Senior Citizens, Women and Youth in Germany.
Distinguished guests, I'm sending you warm regards from Berlin to Vilnius, and also to the many countries you are joining from today. The international nature of your closing conference ties in well with the main theme of the project, early care and the role of men. Since 2021, an international consortium has conducted research on the question of how childhood and primary school pedagogy deals with the topic of caring masculinities. We know from studies that little boys are very caring, just like girls. The older they get, the higher the pressure gets due to stereotypical ideas of masculinity. The results of your project show, in kindergarten and primary schools, there are far too few images of boys and men giving comfort to and tenderly caring for other people. But we do need these images. Moreover, pedagogical staff is not getting sufficiently qualified to teach children in a gender-sensitive way. Therefore, I expressly welcome the fact that the EcaRoM project also develops educational material for professionals. We know that boys who experience harmonious relationships with peers are less likely to become violent when they are older. This is an important step towards a more peaceful society. I wish you a successful closing conference in Vilnius. Yours, Lisa Paus.
Our thanks to the minister. And the presentation is on the slide is getting ahead of me a bit. So now the surprise moment is gone and you know what's going to happen. It's all right. It's fine. Now that you know, it's easier for me, but I will say a few words. Ellie happens to be one of the people who have been working with us on the project for the entire time. And I can guarantee to you that whatever she is going to say is going to be immensely interesting. I've had many conversations with Ellie and I have learned a lot from her, as I believe all of us. It is my greatest pleasure to present to you Ellie Scamber from the Institute for Masculinity Research and Gender Studies in Austria for her presentation, Caring Masculinities and Boyhood. Please welcome Ellie.
You shouldn't have said that already. Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you. I also warmly welcome you at the, sorry? Okay, thank you very much. Okay. Yeah, at the EcaRoM conference, it's good to see that so many people participate in the discussion about caring masculinities in early childhood education. And I also would like to say thank you in the beginning before I start my lecture. Thanks to all the partners in the EcaRoM project. We have a continuous cooperation. We already started in the Boys in Care project, so it was really a great cooperation. I would like to say thank you to my colleague in the Austrian team, Veronika Suppan. Thank you very much for all the work you've done in this project. And I want to say thank you to Elisabeth Zistler and Ben Dresnisser, who always support our projects. These are the Austrian co-funding organizations, and a very big applause for Virginia, Greta, Monica, and Margarita, who organized this event today. Thank you very much for that. So now my 30 minutes start. Okay. Yeah, I will in the next 30 minutes focus on the issue of boys' care and masculinities. And I will start with the context. So you already talked about this. I will also very briefly talk about it, about some major changes in the last decades concerning the gendered structure in European societies. So I brought the Gender Equality Index score. So we see in the Gender Equality Index score a big variation in European countries. For some countries who moved forward in the years 2005 to 2070s, while others lag behind. So nevertheless, although we see this, this variation, this significant variation in European countries, we also see common grounds, we see common changes. And I would very briefly like to talk about it. The first major change in the last decades has been that while for a long time gender has been seen as a women's concern, men have been seen as neutral or normal. This gradually has changed in the last decades, and the issue of man, gender equality and care have been increasingly addressed also in, as you said, in gender equality policies on European level. So, and we see it with a growing recognition that women's employment, women's education, women's employment, and men's share of care are linked issues. This is, for example, reflected in leave regulations on European level, in improvement of leave regulations, which are based on non-transferable use it or lose it concepts. So we see it in the Scandinavian countries already for a long time. We see improvements in Iceland. We see improvements in Spain. So this is one major change, I would say. The second one is that the increase of the employment rate of women and far-reaching changes in the world of work, for example, the increased importance of the service sector, have had a major impact on gender relations as well, and have raised the need for new care arrangements. So typical allocations of care work to women have become fragile in modern European societies, as Heilmann and Scholz pointed it out 2017. Paid labor has become an overall norm independent from gender. So this raised the question of how the unpaid care work can be redistributed. How should we do this? The third change is that the changing economies influence men's prospect in secure long-term employment, as these cannot be put into practice any longer. So discontinuity and also insecure working patterns increasingly characterize man's working life too. And we know that Corona has reinforced these dynamics. And fourth, the European research, like, for example, the role of men in gender equality study in Europe showed that men increasingly participate in unpaid care work. This is one result. So we saw in the role of men study significant regional differences also in Europe, with higher share rates in the Scandinavian countries and lower rates in the Southern European countries. So we saw that the situation changes. We saw that men increasingly participate in unpaid care work, but when we look at the unpaid care on men and women's share in unpaid care work, from the EIGE study 2018 data on 2015, we see still gender care gap when it comes to unpaid care work. So especially in Austria, for example, we have an incredible high care gap here, also in Switzerland, Norway, and so on. So we see that some things change, and we see that some things change in slow motion, while others seem to not change at all. So we are confronted with persistent phenomena, such as the gender segregation on the labor market, and this project is also focusing on the gender segregation on the labor market. We are confronted with phenomena such as an incredible gender pay gap still in some countries, and this is connected to the gender pension gap and a still unequal division of paid and unpaid care work. And we also still see traditional power-based forms of masculinity developed in close relation with the growth-oriented capitalism. And we know that the capitalist systems are still linked to the idea of an autonomous but implicitly male subject outlined already in Connell's concept of hegemonic masculinity. So man's dominance is still obvious, and as colleague Joanne Ecker pointed it out already in the 90s, the whole capitalist system is based on the asymmetrical division of labor, the asymmetrical division of paid and unpaid work. So this is the context. This is the context in which we worked on this project. So, and this is also why we concentrate our research since many, many years on questions around caring masculinity in different fields of life and also in different age groups. So EcaRoM, this European project, concentrated on the work with the very young. With the very young children, on questions if aspects of caring masculinity are already addressed in the work with the very young, in kindergarten, in primary school. And before we now listen to the analysis results presented by our colleagues, before we look at the tools and materials that have been developed, in which we try to put a normative or theoretical concept into practice, I would briefly like to talk about boyhood, masculinity and care, about growing up about growing up under different circumstances and what study results also on the qualitative level tell us about it. Okay, we start with the growing up topic with gender norms. So despite the variety of European societies characterized by low to high countries' overall advancement in gender equality and practices, we know that gender norms are still evident and they are based on a gender binary system. So on a system that differentiates women and men, but not other genders. So norms are the basis for gendered expectations. They influence how people behave. They tell them what they should like and what they shouldn't like, how they should look like and things like that. So gender norms restrict children and prevent them also from developing their interest and their abilities. So those who do not fit into the categories of boys and girls are often ignored, are often corrected or suppressed. So gender expectations represent strong social attributions. Therefore, it is relevant to critically reflect these expectations and acknowledge the ways girls, boys, and also non-binary kids are perceived, that this way can be changed. Masculinity expectations come in here. Masculinity expectations are requirements that all those who are perceived or feel as boys have to deal with. Masculinity is traditionally associated with concepts such as you know, rationality, authority, strength, potentiality, heterosexuality, defensiveness, and so on. This means that those who want or should be considered boys are best athletic, not too thick or too thin, popular with and interested in girls sexually and romantically, respected by boys or men, non-feminine, successful without excessive effort, not mentally or physically impaired, sexually potent, white, and so on and so on. This is what our colleague Thomas Viola-Rieske wrote 2018. So the fulfillment of these aspects is accompanied by a realistic expectation of enjoying high levels of power, recognition, and high levels of security. But it is also clear that a fulfillment of these social expectations includes the danger that male characteristics must be confirmed again and again, also in a destructive way. So being a man does not solely mean display a male body, but it also means taking a symbolic place as a real man. So the US psychologist Robert Brennan has found four principles that are the basis of what it means to be a man. According to hegemonic, powerful roles. We might not agree with these rules, but we know these rules. So one rule is be a sturdy oak, be solid, firm, whatever comes. Also in a crisis situation, be a rock. Don't be a human being. You don't have to be a human being. You don't have to be emotional. The second one is be a big wheel, be important, get rich, powerful, have big friends, measure your masculinity through competition. Second rule. Third rule, give them hell, go for it. Be daring, take risks, rather than respect your own well-being, rather than respect your own safety, your own health. And fourth, no sissy stuff, to under no condition, never appear feminine or appear gay. So these are four rules, and we can see dimensions in these rules which can be described as the so-called toxic side of masculinity. They are largely contaminated with fighting, with competition, with really huge effort, with unhealthy and sometimes unhappy ways of life, and also with violence against others and against themselves, actually. So toxic here means bad for others, but it means also bad for men themselves. So how do these dimensions influence boys? How does masculinity develop in boys? The social relations among men play an important role in forming pictures about masculinities and also help to explain boys and later also man's higher overall inclination to violent behavior. Michael Kimmel said once, guys hear the voices of the men in their lives, fathers, coaches, brothers, grandfathers, uncles, priests. So these ideas of masculinities from these men in their lives, they are transferred from generation to generation with a certain self-concept, or with a certain, a self-concept as a result, which was described as the Guy Code by Michael Kimmel. The Guy Code is a collection of attitudes, a collection of values, a collection of traits that compose an orientation patterns of what it means to be a man. And also results from boyhood study, and Gary Barker today in the afternoon will also talk about it. Very recent results from boyhood studies. They show that if we want to know more about the orientation pattern of masculinity, the influence of the peer group should not be neglected. So also Kimmel said, our peers are kind of a gender police, always waiting for us to screw up so they can give us a ticket for crossing the well-drawn boundaries of manhood. So the boy code and the Guy code, they are related to the concept of hegemonic masculinity developed by Reuben Connell, an orientation pattern for men hard to reach but very efficient, and an orientation pattern that relates to the subordination of others, to the subordination of women, I would say to the subordination of other genders as well, and to the subordination of other men. And we have to address this because also among boys, we see this process of creation of a gender order. It's an important characteristic of differentiation. But we also have to pay attention that orientation patterns of masculinities differ. Here we need to include the intersectional approach in order to recognize and understand the patterns. It is well known that, and variously also verified in research, that processes in which masculinities are negotiated and represented are closely related to success or failing in the education system. And here, Jürgen Budde in Germany did some studies on that. And also, I also want to point out to the studies you might know from Steve Phoenix and Frosch, who have shown in studies of masculinity patterns in British private schools that these are closely linked to efficiency and achievement orientation. At the same time, in the same place, in the same city, I would say, the city of London, masculinity patterns of boys in public schools were completely different. So they were much more connected with having problems with the police, no educational success at all, and also deviant careers. So the same time, the same city, completely different aspects of hegemonic masculinities. Also in a study in Germany, the study from Cornelia Helferich and her team, this study that was conducted in main schools, they were able to show that devaluing educational success as unmanly is a relevant strategy for traditional hegemonic masculinity in educationally deprived context. Also, Olaf Stuwe, our colleague from Germany, wrote, the phenomena of rejection of academic work environment already described from Paul Willis in the 70s for white male students from proletarian milieu in British societies still can be found in Germany in 2014, and it still can be found now. So we need to pay attention to this intersectional perspective when we want to know more about masculinity patterns. Intersectional analysis also shows that subordinated masculinities themselves often act violently to assure themselves of a powerful position in the sense of compensating for masculinity. So the impossibility to participate at the top level of hegemonic masculinity forces boys to develop alternative patterns of masculinity, which may turn out as problematic or can be regarded as deviant. Susanne Spindler, she did biographical interviews with young men in German jails and found out that body and violence-oriented forms of masculinity are emphasized if accepted forms of masculinity are out of reach. And these alternative forms of masculinity often lead into prison. So an in-depth, it was a biographical interview study, an in-depth analysis of their life conditions lead to a deeper understanding of the reasons for the development of such violence-oriented patterns. So she said, while their path of life and education seemed to be rather open at an early age, these conditions narrowed and closed at an older age. The access to education and work increasingly narrowed, which limited their perspectives on life and lead to deviation as a possibility to deal with these limitations. So this is, I think, a very relevant study also. So based on such studies, we see that it's not easy in real life to put this sense of entitlement for dominance in societies into practice. And being focused on such a sense of entitlement for dominance can lead to an endless loop of self-assurance struggles. Men can feel the need to reassert their manhood again and again, sometimes taking risks that may threaten their livelihood or the livelihood of others in their near social environment. The cycle becomes threatening if a fragile self-concept of masculinity is called into question. This is what my colleague Romeo Bisutti said. So the pressure to satisfy certain images of traditional masculinity can subsequently lead to a lack of the development of social skills necessary to deal with oneself and others. So for example, some boys are unable to build sustainable friendship, unable to build sustainable relationship, or to ask for help, or to admit to the need for help. Some can do it. So we need here, and this is what we did in the EcaRoM project, to integrate the concept of caring masculinity into pedagogical work with the very young children. This can offer a space for boys to approach their own desire and needs and find ways to live these desires and needs without threatening other people's life or their own life. So the concept of caring masculinities has been increasingly addressed in European research and also on European policy level. In the study on the role of men in gender equality, we based the concept of caring masculinity upon Nancy Fraser's model of gender equality. Fraser defined care as a human norm and obligation for all genders. And we said in order to avoid essentialist perspectives and to meet complex realities, we understood the concept in a wide sense. The first thing people think about when they hear caring masculinity is fatherhood. So it's relevant. Fatherhood is relevant. Feeding babies, putting them into to bed, and so this is all relevant. But care encompasses more. It also means emotional support, showing affections, and a deeper kind of attention to the needs of others. And it also means taking care for others, for friends, for people in my social environment, for my colleagues. It means also looking at care occupations, for example. It means what Carla Elliott, a sociologist from Australia, pointed out. She suggested to include also rejection of dominance, rejection of male dominance and rejection of violence, and the integration of values of care, such as positive emotions, interdependency, and relationality as central features of caring masculinities. Carla Elliott differentiated between care for and care about. So what did she mean? Care for in the sense of care duties that can be carried out by a man, and care about issues are what she described as the affective, emotional aspect of care. So man's rejection of violence and the ability to connect to others are care about issues. This is also a relevant aspect of caring masculinity. It's also the self-care aspect by reducing risk-taking lifestyles. So seen through this lens of this updated masculinity, man can benefit from gender equality because he questions social norms that are not good for men themselves. And I also want to very briefly talk about another beneficiary aspect, the quality of life study conducted in Norway in 2007 from our colleague Øystein Gullvåg Holte, and then also in Poland, 2015, also showed an interesting result, because they showed in this study that the risk for physical punishment is highest in families where the father decides alone, second highest in family where the mother decides alone, and lowest if both equally decide. And this, when both decide equally, they also share resources equally, and this also means sharing of care duties. So I think this is a very relevant benefit from caring masculinity when we can talk about gender-based violence prevention here. Okay, so how did we address caring masculinity in the EcaRoM project? We try to transfer this concept of care into the practical field of education by addressing different aspects. So the individual aspect of self-care, maintaining personal health and well-being, was addressed. Then near social environment aspects, care work necessary to ensure the daily physical, social and emotional well-being, for example. We addressed the professional aspects, professional care work in the fields of education, health and social care. We addressed community work. We addressed social engagement as a whole. For example, solidarity for marginalized groups in society. We addressed the gender equality aspect, the ecological aspect, means caring for nature and the planet we live on, and also the attitudinal aspect, which means the rejection of violence and the rejection of male privileges in society. So these were the aspects that we tried to address in developing our gender-sensitive material, which will then be shown in the other room, I think. So how did we do it? From a pedagogical approach, we did kind of an adaptation of the trilemma of inclusion from Anne Boger. And I would very briefly introduce this concept before we have a look at the material. We addressed actually three angles. The angle of empowerment for care means that a framework should be created in which boys are relieved of traditional masculinity demands and in which care is reinforced and its positive effects are clarified. In practice, this can mean addressing emotions, encouraging children to help and involve them in care activities. On the second angle, the normalization of diverse masculinity, addressing this means addressing equal relationship, addressing vulnerability with boys, addressing the acceptance of gender diversity, of dealing with the unknown. And the third angle is the deconstruction of traditional patterns of masculinity, which means questioning dominance, questioning risk-taking lifestyles, questioning competition, violence, discrimination. So based on the assumption that children are caring human beings, so based on actually Nancy Fraser's concept, the EcaRoM project aimed to strengthen the caring aspect in early childhood education, especially focusing on boys, and developed ways to involve it in everyday interactions. So we attempt to answer the question, how can we transfer such a model of caring masculinity into practice? We attempt to answer the question by sharing the materials we developed today. And I will end my lecture now with showing a karaoke movie in which images and ideas about caring masculinities in everyday life of children are addressed. Alex is my friend is a song that has been developed from the Austrian team, and Veronica very much participated because she sang the song. You will hear Veronica now singing. It tends to primarily focus on caring for others from the kids' point of view. Through this song, the emotional and caring personal parts of kids become visible, parts that increasingly become excluded in an older age, what we know from studies. So thank you, that's all for the moment. And now let's watch the movie and listen to the song.
Alex is my friend. Alex is my friend. Alex is my friend because he cares for me. He comforts me. He comforts me because he is my friend and really cares for me.
Alex is my friend. Alex is my friend. Alex is my friend because he cares for me. He plays with me. He plays with me because he is my friend and really cares for me.
Alex is my friend. Alex is my friend. Alex is my friend because he cares for me. He helps me. He helps me because he is my friend and really cares for me.
Alex is my friend.
Alex is my friend. Alex is my friend because he cares for me. He listens to me.
He listens to me
Because he is my friend and really cares for me.
Alex is my friend. Alex is my friend. Alex is my friend because he cares for me.
He shares with me. He shares with me because he is my friend and really cares for me.
Thank you, Ellie. Thank you so much. I'm afraid people online may have missed the little karaoke party that was here by the end of the song. But if you didn't, then that's great. If you did, the video will be available. You can do it on your own at home. So now that we are familiar with the notions of caring masculinities and care and boyhood, let's dive into the project presentation. And who better to start than the person who kept everybody in line? And it is my greatest joy to present to you Daniel Holtermann from the Institute for Education and Research in Germany, Dissens, who has been coordinating us and will introduce the project with the talk, Why is it necessary to talk about caring masculinities and early childhood education? Daniel, please.
Thank you. So, yeah, I guess my Lithuanian is not so good yet. Everything starts with a break, one friend of me said. So I have a glass of water. There you go. So it's wonderful to see you all. I'm very pleased to be here. And I'm very thankful to have shared the last kind of 5 years with this wonderful consortium working together on caring masculinities on 2 projects, which I'm going to introduce now in a little while. And I'm very thankful for my team. There's a lot of people worked in the last 2.5 years at the Dissens team in this project. And I'm really thankful that the things I'm presenting, it's of course not only my work, it's the work of everybody contributed in this project. And so the topic is, why is it necessary to talk about caring masculinities in early childhood education? I'd like to present you 4 points of 4 things, which are the following. I want to speak about gender inequality in unpaid and paid care work. We had some figures already. I'd just like to repeat some of them or look at some more details. I want to speak about the importance of care, Ellie showed already the figure we are using to define caring masculinities. And I only have one theory, which is the occupational maps from Linda S. Gottfriedson, which kind of, for me, explains why it is important to talk as early as possible about caring masculinities. And last but not least, the project Boys in Care and EcaRoM. And I hope I will manage so that we can go in time for a coffee break in like 20 minutes. So I'll start, I changed the presentation a bit. I will start with the importance of care. Ellie spoke about Carla Elliott already. I'm quoting here Joan Tronto, which says, on the most general level, we suggest that caring be viewed as a species activity that includes everything that we do, maintain, continue, and repair our world so that we can live in it as well as possible. That world includes our bodies, ourselves, and our environment, all of which we seek to interweave in a complex life-sustaining web. And I really like this definition of Joan Tronto because it's larger. It's not only care for oneself, it's not only care for another, it's care for everything. And I think this is a very crucial issue in terms of caring masculinity as well, that it's not about oneself or the other, it's about everything. To make it a little bigger, you know. But I'm joking, but it's really serious. As she said, it's about bodies, ourselves, and the life-sustaining web. And we somehow tried to put this large-scale definition in this graphic of caring masculinities. It had little different colors than the one Ellie presented, but it's the same content. And I explicitly want to stress these points: rejection of violence and care for gender equality and justice. Because care itself doesn't mean that it promotes gender equality. Through care, dominance can be reproduced too. Care actually fits, in some cases, good to masculinity in terms of patronizing. So I am knowing what is better for you than you know yourself. So in this concept, it's really important that we stress it, that it's implementing gender equality and gender justice. And empathy is there, which I like a lot, because the emotional side, if we're looking on boys growing up, then the emotional side is developed, but through gender and masculinity, it shrinks. You know, the expression of boys and men, they're getting, let's say, not so big anymore. You know, I like this when I do my trainings, usually how femininity is connected to how you look and how you listen. It's active listening is connected with femininity. And if boys or men listen, it's usually like that. So this is being learned from early on. And this, how to approach the emotions, etc., is learned from early on. So we thought in our project, it's important to start as early as possible. And I added here 2 points, which I really found important too, is the visibility and the value. Care is happening everywhere. It's happening now. Persons are preparing our coffee break, for example. Persons are cleaning. It's happening now. Persons are caring in kindergartens for our kids. It's happening all the time, but it's not really visible in terms of the mainstream visibility of care. Is not as it should be in my eyes. And connected with it, the value, because not only the pandemic showed that care is an essential value for the running of our society and ourselves, because if we don't care for ourselves, then life would be kind of not possible. This is like the concept we're used and try to incorporate in our pedagogy and our research. So why is it necessary to talk about caring masculinity in early childhood education? Because care is a main value and care is needed to be learned from early on, especially from men. If we look at the figures, who does care? We heard it already. Here's another figure from the Eurostat. It's seen here, shown here, the participation time per day in households and family care by gender in hours and minutes. It's from 2015. And you can see in the blue lines that it's women averagely mainly do more time in households for caring activities. For example, in Germany, it's like per day 2.5 hours men doing household chores and women nearly 4 hours. And we have the same pattern repeating in all countries. So unpaid care work is in family contexts mainly done by women. We have the same pattern if we look at paid care work, and paid care work is jobs, occupations. That's the next figure, quoted here from Eurostat as well. It's fields of study, and in which field are men and women mainly. And you can see business administration and law, it's 10.4 and 14.4% women. If you look at engineering, strange, it's more men doing engineering. And health and welfare, it's more women doing health and welfare, and you have the same in education. So we see care is mainly done in unpaid and a paid way by women. And if we especially look at childcare pedagogues, which is one of the target group of our project, it's even more striking. It's here shown childcare workers and teachers' aides in the European Union in 2020. And you see, strange, 39% of the childcare workers are women. I mean, that's kind of striking, you know, comparing to the whole European Union. I mean, Germany is a little better, you know, in Germany we have 9% in Berlin. But I mean, it must be striking. No, why is it that so many women work in childcare and none of the men? And usually it's, you can see it, that the more handy, the more direct the care activities are, the little men you can find there, the less. Yeah, and you can see the pattern here. And as I said before, care is an important value for each one of us as well as for society, and it should not be connected to gender. And now, again, coming back to the question, why is it necessary to talk about caring masculinities in early childhood education? I want to show you this little figure I made, referring to the theory of Linda S. Gottfriedson. And this theory is about how we choose professions and how does it come, or what influences our occupational maps. Occupational maps meaning that at the beginning of your life, you have like a lot of possibilities at the age of 0, what you're going to work. Like this is like possible job aspirations are it's a lot. Like, I guess not all the job aspirations, but many. Then if you grow up, these possible job aspirations, they shrink from many to few. And this process is connected to socialization, to growing up. So what makes these possibilities shrink is, first of all, 3 to 5, the development of a gender identity, and looking, okay, people are doing jobs actually. So like And the question is, what is seen as job? You know, if I usually speak with young people, then like a social worker is not really concerned to be a job. It's somebody who's around you, but it's not a profession. Like a truck driver is more a job, or a fireman or policeman. You know, but you know, that is in my adult mind. But as a kid, you just see, okay, there's people doing jobs, and then later on you kind of deselect your possible occupations by your gender identity. So it's not a conscious process, it's a subconscious process that is running, that you're looking, okay, who's the fireman and who's the policeman, and what is my gender identity? So there's a deselection process already running, which is not conscious. And it goes on, this deselection process, with the coherence to a social background. So does the possible job fit to your family resources? Is this academic, non-academic, or what values are in your family? And then only by the end of 14 years, you choose consciously from this shrinked map your possible job aspiration. So there's a lot of processing, deselection process before you even choose a job. And that's why it's important to start as early as possible to give diverse pictures of, for example, job professions, to show men in caring professions as well. I would say this you could like transfer to care and activities too. So what activities are connected to my gender and what activities can I do? You will learn through this process. And what we found out in Germany, and I think it's in other countries too, that the gender pressure is much higher in primary school in comparison to kindergarten. And I would say that care is even less accepted by boys and men in primary school than kindergarten. And so it goes on and on and on. So it's important to talk as early as possible about caring masculinities. And we did it. Here you go. That was the first project we're doing. We were doing it's Boys in Care, strengthening boys to pursue care occupations. It was from 2017 to 2019, and we had the focus on boys above the age of 10. And we were trying to support creating supportive environments for boys to pursue care careers, challenging the cultural description of care work, and fostering caring masculinities. And we were, as I said, working with the boys above 10 years. And in EcaRoM, we're working with boys and young people below 10 years. The good thing is about the Boys in Care project, it's finished. And we did good work. For example, this brochure you can find here on the conference, and you can find online. It's for pedagogues working with boys in English and national languages, focusing on methods and the knowledge behind the methods, how to teach caring masculinities. So that was what we did in 2017. And we realized then that already in the age of 12, gender stereotypes are already been set. So they're kind of not fixed, but they are more solid. And it would be good to start as early as possible to work on caring masculinities. And so we did. The next project was luckily funded as well, Early Care and the Role of Men. That's our final conference here. And it's like, I would say, a celebration as well, because the 2 years we worked well together, and I really enjoyed this working together with all of you. And the focus of this EcaRoM project was to overcome gender stereotypes in early childhood and primary education through mainstream values, benefit of caring masculinities for society as whole. And as I said, here is the primary target group is, well, actually it's pedagogical staff. We did further trainings, etc. But then we wanted to reach with educating pedagogical staff, the boys below 10 years. And what did we do in this project? We first of all did some research in every country. We did analyze the state of the art of gender-sensitive pedagogy and legislation. We will hear more about that after the coffee break. I'm very happy that we have some insights, and we did a transnational report. So first research, then the second thing is we did develop educational material like the song we just heard, and I hope it's still stuck in your mind. Perhaps we sing it at the end again. I like it very much, and we'll see some more material before lunch break, and it's online too. So if you're online, please check out our website, EcaRoM.eu. It's already online. It's and Rosa will present some more of it later on. That was the second step. The third step is like further education capacity building training with pedagogues, working directly with pedagogues and trying to teach them about caring masculinities. And fourth was to develop another manual. So the one I just showed, we have for children below 10 years as well. And we're going to have a digital self-learning platform. And we will hear about that later too. And I'm very happy that we're kind of living the European idea here, because we are working with 6 different countries together. Sometimes it's challenging, but in most cases it's just wonderful. And I'm very happy that we have so many different perspectives from Germany, Austria, Bulgaria, Slovenia, Italy, and Lithuania. And Monica already said who's working for us. And last but not least, I'd like to quote from the study in Germany, an educator, and I like the quotation a lot. The educator said, "We have to talk about what is not visible, the ways that boys don't go in terms of care because they learn very early that is unmanly. We don't see them because the boys don't go. We can only get there if we make them a variety of offers, and the mental permission is there to be a caring ballet dancer." So it's not only about creating the material and sharing that with the people, it's your own mental state as well, your attitude towards gender equality and caring masculinities. And with that quotation, I'm thanking you for your attention, and question answers later.
So as Daniel advertised, we will have a question and answer session from 12 later on. So now we are going to a short coffee break of 20 minutes. It is just out there in the foyer for those online, and it is wherever you choose to have for those in person, sorry. And it is wherever you choose to have it for those online. It's up to you. We will see you all in 20 minutes. Enjoy your coffee or whatever you decide to do. Everyone. Let's try to keep with time, everyone. We're a few minutes late, but a few minutes are fine. Let's not make it into 10. For example, I can still see people coming in slowly, trickling in. That's fine. So again, the slide presents the future to you before I do. But nonetheless, it is my very, very big joy and pleasure as we move on with the presentation of the project to invite 2 colleagues of ours, Živa Humer from the Pista Institute in Slovenia and Erika Bernacchi from Istituto degli Innocenti in Italy, to present the insights from our transnational report of the EcaRoM project. Ladies.
Thank you, Monica. Hello, everyone. It's really a pleasure. It's always a pleasure to be in Vilnius. Today, it's a special pleasure to be with all of you in person after these 2 years of COVID. It's really nice to be, to socialize again. And of course, thank you to organizing, to the organizational team, of our EcaRoM project. Today with Erika, we will present insights from our EcaRoM transnational report. Basically, we divided our work today. And of course, before we go to the content part, let me also say that transnational report was prepared in a team together with Antonio Di Grigoli and Maida Hrjanjak, who are unfortunately not with us today, but this is, of course, our common and shared work, based on, of course, national reports with the contribution of all our EcaRoM partners. So, from here. Yeah, okay. So what we did in EcaRoM project, in the first phase, we reviewed early childhood education policy documents, existing research, and didactical tools. So each partner selected the main and analyzed the main ECEC policy documents or any other relevant documents for pedagogues. Then each partner also selected 3 to 5 national studies about gender-sensitive education, tackling gender stereotypes related to boys, men, masculinities, and care, of course, in early childhood education. And also we checked recent projects in our national context, which aim at overcoming gender stereotypes in early childhood education, developed, as I said, by national authorities or NGOs. In the next stage of this research part, we also did qualitative research based on in-depth interviews with educators of ECEC services, teachers of primary schools, and experts in the field of gender-sensitive education. We also did focus groups interviews with policymakers, scholars, and experts who deal with gender-sensitive research and specifically with caring masculinities, aimed at early childhood, as well as educators and teachers. And we also used checklists to collect further data. And this part will later on present Erika. So about the review of policy documents, we found out that legislation and policy documents address issues relating to gender and gender equality, diversity in care in a quite general way without providing specific guidelines. Therefore, the commitment in many cases depend on individual teacher, individual interest of this teacher, and engagement on how to deal with equality, gender equality, and gender stereotypes in their work with children. Topics of care are included in kindergarten activities, for example, in the context of self-care, getting to know different professions, occupations, activities related to the topics of division of work in the families and households. And also the common nominator in all 6 national reports are that there is a small percentage of men in kindergarten teachers in ECEC, except as we heard from Daniel in Germany, specifically in Berlin. Then we also found out that there is a lack of guidelines for gender-sensitive pedagogy related to boys and masculinities and care, with some exceptions in school education in Austria and Germany. If we take a look of the existing research, what we observed that there is a lack of systematic national research about gender stereotypes in general in ECEC. So instead of that, there are many small-scale fragmented research produced within different action projects of EU or financed by EU or diploma, master or PhD studies. What else? Yeah, we also saw that there is a lack of interdisciplinarity in these studies. There is a focus on sociology. When studies are produced within pedagogical discipline, we observed a lack of gender expertise. And where gender expertise is included, there is an evident absence of critical men and masculinity study approach. Also, we observed less studies on ECEC compared to primary or secondary schools because of what we already heard of this too early bias, meaning the general belief that gender stereotypes are not relevant in kindergartens, but only later in the primary schools. So research that focus specifically on masculinities and on the gender stereotypes around boyhood, masculinities and care are almost entirely absent. There are few small-scale research in Slovenia which point that boys can be even more affected by gender stereotypes compared to girls. In Italy, for example, we saw that masculinity is taken into consideration only in adolescence, with a focus on formation of toxic masculinities and gender-based violence. In existing research, the focus is more or less on girls and STEAM skills, so science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, while masculinities and education, health, and welfare skills are backslidden. And the third point from my side, so about pedagogical material and didactical tools, we found out that there are rather than systematic national actions, they're mainly are produced by NGOs within framework of the EU projects. Experts also pointed to the lack of cooperation and networking between NGOs and teachers in kindergartens and schools to transfer the material and good practices. With exception of Austria and Germany, and partly also Germany, there is a lack of systematic learning platforms at national levels for teachers, which would offer collection of material, of didactical support produced in different projects. Most of the material provide information for teachers, while gender-sensitive tools such as toys, picture books, games aimed directly to children are rare. And most of the material is based on a gender binary conception and mostly addresses girls and promotion of STEAM skills, while materials introducing boys to education, health, and welfare professions and skills are less frequent. Other stereotypes about masculinities, so related to body, emotions, invulnerability, health, heteronormativity, competitiveness, and violence are rarely tackled. So we can conclude that there is an obvious need for pedagogical material that deconstructs care as an inherent natural feminine trait and present it, as we already heard it by Daniel's presentation, as a universal human activity. So we need material that would highlight the importance of working with emotions, human codependency, empathy, and solidarity. And what we also concluded that the creation of a database or repository of all already existing materials would be necessary and needed. So this would be from my side all at the moment, and I'm passing the floor to Erika.
Thank you, Shiva. Good morning, everybody. I will continue the presentation about the next topic, which is gender-sensitive education. So what we have observed, mostly based on our qualitative research, so focus groups and in-depth interviews, is that indeed there has been a progress in the way education is provided to children, and for instance in the organization of space, in the fact that children, both boys and girls, are offered the same toys, they can do the same kind of activities. For instance, they would be able to play with the home corner or the builder's corner, and there's no gender segregation. Although there are still some gender stereotypes, but indeed in the last years, a progress has been made. And I would like to read a quotation from an educator from Slovenia, saying, "Role-playing is very common, and children, both girls and boys, like to dress up, wear masks, decorate. They also like to dress up as the opposite sex. through body and body work, they dispel gender stereotypes of what isn't appropriate for boys and girls. However, notwithstanding this progress, we still have a number of gaps. First of all, we observe that there is not enough gender-sensitive material which is available for educators and teachers. And this is one of the main reasons why within this project we produce this kind of material, which will be shown in a while. As Jiva said, there is a general lack of focus on masculinities, and this goes back to the old idea that gender is something, it's a dimension linked exclusively to women. Then another area in which we observed quite a few stereotypes is the area of occupation and profession, which is key in this project. And this is an area in which stereotypes emerge because professions are presented to kids in a rather stereotypical way. And there is also a lack of gender-sensitive language. In terms of gender stereotypes by teachers, educators, and by children, the general idea is that teachers and educators perceive themselves as not having gender stereotypes, at least not explicit gender stereotypes. However, they also recognize the importance of doing self-reflection work. And this is why within the project we produced some checklists that would list a number of dimensions to reflect on their own behavior, which were considered useful. Concerning the relevance of gender stereotypes, there is a general, for children, there is a general understanding that these are less pronounced in the until the age of 3. Whereas from the age of 4, they start to become visible, and even more so in primary school. Here is a quotation from a teacher in Germany saying, in the children, the doing gender can be seen, among other things, in the way they dress, in negotiating conflicts, in being in gender homogeneous groups, in sanctioning deviant behavior from gender norms, in occupational orientations, and in caring practices. The normative pressures on boys not to behave in a feminine way is already perceptible in early education and upbringing. Then comes the issue of men in early childhood education and care services. As it has already been said, in all partner countries, these are a minority, and therefore a need is expressed to raise their presence. So why is this so? Well, there are many reasons. One of the reasons is the fact that this is still a job which has an economic and social status which is low. And although we know that the model of the male breadwinner is in crisis, this still has a hold on men's minds. And so this is something which prevents a number of men to undertake this kind of position. However, on the other hand, we also observe that in some situations, the demand for male educators can produce a counter stereotype, both in terms of social and salary recognition, which poses ethical questions. Here is again a quote from an educator in Germany saying, "They offer me so much right away that I immediately earned much more than everyone else, because they absolutely wanted to keep me as the only man, which I found unfair to the others." So that's one of the ethical questions which arises when it comes to raising the presence of men in early childhood education. Other kinds of controversies are that if on the one hand, for sure, an increased presence of men can convey the message to children that men too can perform care, it's not automatic that their presence equate to a measure to counter gender stereotypes. This happens, for instance, when like a man educator comes in an all-female kindergarten, and then they say, "Oh, fantastic, the man has come so he can play football with the children. He can take the children out for sport activities," this kind of remarks. So In this case, the message is the opposite. And so this is why we need to be continuously reflective, even when we want to introduce measures that we think are going towards gender equality. And then this can also lead somehow to a devaluation of female professional who have been doing this work since forever. Now a man comes and all of a sudden is like very much appreciated. Another important issue is the specter of child sexual abuse. This came up rather often in the interviews. There is still a social prejudice against male educators as potential abusers. And this is, of course, linked to the hypersexualization of men in care work. And so this is an issue which needs to be addressed. So in terms of recommendation, we came out with the recommendation that it is important to promote a reflection on the relationship between the presence of male educators versus the contrasting perpetuation of gender stereotypes in education. And to address this issue of the child sexual abuse, there is the need to adopt a clear concept of child protection, which also addresses this issue of the suspicion of sexualized violence by male educators. Then in terms of the presence of men in childhood education, we also observe that fathers are more present for sure throughout the countries, but there is still a differentiation with mothers. For instance, when there is an emergency case, it's often the mothers who is called and not the father. So another area is that of training. And we recommended in the report that caring masculinity and gender-sensitive pedagogy become part of the systematic training for all educators. Then we also think that it is important to pay attention to a number of areas such as communication skills, ability to involve parents, how to work with gender equality indirectly through play, daily activities, everyday life, and so on. And also how to proactively approach the highly gendered stereotypes images which are present in the media, fairy tales, and so on. And we also think that it's important to provide training courses and materials to parents, potentially before the starting of the activities, so that this can be helpful for them to clear a number of doubts and also to ensure a more cohesive environment for children, sorry. Then final point, how do we raise the importance of care and caring masculinities? We observed that there is a lack of research and guidelines on gender-sensitive pedagogy related to boy. Yes, that caring professions and activities are presented in a very stereotypical way, at least in most cases. So stereotypes materials are not discussed. Male carers are invisible. So the final recommendations that somehow sum up everything is that further efforts should be directed into developing an inclusive gender-sensitive education system that involves critical work on men and masculinities, that works also on educational and professional desegregation, and that also takes into account the spectrum of gender realities beyond gender binarism. And yes, that I think can sum up our work. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Erica and Jiva. And as many of our presenters already teased, we have prepared a lot of things that people can actually use. So I would like to invite Rosa Dimova from the Center of Women's Studies and Policies in Bulgaria to present the materials. Rosa? Yeah, there you are.
Thank you. Good day to all of you. It's a pleasure that I will present the most creative part of the project. And it's colorful presentation and it's a teaser. Then after my presentation, you will have the chance to go and see the materials in live. They are there. So materials for work with children. This is one of the parts that we developed and already uploaded on our website. And you can find, download, print, and use in your everyday work. I suppose if we have audience here and online teachers, they will be very interested of what we prepared here. So who are our materials for? These materials are developed by project partners to be used in teachers and educators' everyday work with their groups and classes. They are divided into groups, columns, materials for kindergartens, and 3 to 6 years old children, and materials for primary school, age 6 to 10 years old. Some of the materials are suitable for both age groups, and we marked in the website which are they. They are not still, but will be until end of the project, translated in 6 languages. In English, we'll have the whole collection. In national language versions, we'll have some differences, but we have materials that are all translated in all languages. So these materials combine experiences from different national contexts, and the most important, they're tested already in educational institutions, and we have feedback from teachers. How are they? What we need to do better, or it is okay. So the aims of these materials is to equip teachers and educators with simple methods that are accessible online, and we distribute also in offline in printed copies. Some of them are only videos, you'll see. The aim is to encourage teachers to engage children in activities that reveal stereotypes about care, work, and gender, and to start the conversation in early education on care roles, caring masculinities, and care as a valuable work for family, society, and environment. And this is what children understand very fast. And when they tested the materials, this aim is obvious. The children understand very well and fast. So where they can be found, we already developed a section. This is our website, part of it, where we posted studies and materials. This is how the page looks like, and this is the link. But I encourage you to see the whole website, because we have everything there, the studies, the materials for work with children, and we will have the repository, as Jiva said, where teachers can find educational self-learning methods. So the types of materials we develop. We have a song and a method, a lesson. This is from Austria. We already sang the song, but once again. And this method is one of these that are suitable for both age groups. So it is very easy. Then we have puzzles from Slovenia, and you can see it in this, after this door, in this hidden room. They're very colorful and also very interesting. And we have another material from Slovenia. This is a method and a workbook, Let's Play. This is one of the types of activities. Here, children need to color the picture, but they are also connecting dots, recognizing which shade is to which bear, different things that are suitable for everyday work in kindergarten. So we have these very beautiful memory cards from Lithuania and two types of games with instructions. One part is about professions and the other part is about caring activities. And the idea of memory cards, as you know, you turn back and then you need to recognize the same card, same profession, same activity, and then you can see that one and the same activity and profession can be performed by boys and girls, and this is not unusual thing. And even I liked a lot that Lithuanian colleagues included older generation in the cards, which is very valuable and very recognizable situation for kids. This is our material, the Bulgarian one, which we are very proud of. It is called Caring Lily and Nikki. And based on this material, we developed three types of methods, ideas for lessons. The one is, here you see a picture of choosing the profession. These paper dolls can be dressed in different costumes. They have accessoires, and children are divided in a group of 4 small groups, and they need to discuss and then to draw which profession they choose and why, and then the pictures can be, the teacher can make an exhibition and invite also the parents, and thus start a conversation with the parents, because in our work, especially for developing the platform for online learning, we realized that teachers and kids are one side, but the work with parents is also a very important part of the work, and teachers, I think in every country, needs support materials that they can use to start and develop this conversation, but without creating pressure and without creating other conflictual situation. Because in some countries, maybe in many, this is a taboo topic, and you know, parents are suspicious. Why in kindergarten you need to raise this question? Why you tackle gender issue at all in kindergarten? It's too early. It's not related to our children. And so one big part of our work is to provide teachers with advices, materials, and let's say arguments how and why they can start and lead the conversation with the parents. This is the other part of our material. Here we have the house, the professions, also the Caring Lily and Nikki, who are in conversation, how what path, professional path they choose. Their brother and sister in our game. They're in the 3rd group of kindergarten. And also this beautiful house, we created a video based on this, as all other partners, videos that explain the method. So the teacher can see the video and then use more easily the kit, the set. And we have this material from Germany. It's called Care Detectives. As you see, you have the pictures of 2 men that perform caring activities. But before you see these pictures, you see only this part of pictures, and you need to guess who is this and what he is doing, and then reveal what is the real situation, to explain that men also can do this, and this is absolutely normal situation. We have the book, Men Care Storybook from Austria. You'll see it, and Ellie and Veronica will explain what is the story, how it leads children through the story. This is a story about a little boy that goes to school, and on his path he discovers many men that perform caring activities, and then he decides to become to help people and to care also. This is the Italian method and material. This is a story box. Erica will tell you more where it comes from, etc. But this is very simple method that every teacher can adapt, invent, and do as he or she likes. The box is a shoe box, very ordinary material. It is colored in interesting colors, and then you use materials, eco materials, but you may choose whatever materials you want. The idea is to tell a story by using this box as a mini theater and putting the objects inside, outside of the box. I'm not sure we use titulopoti or not. Okay. We use a very interesting story about a little wolf that want to be a florist, but his father is not do not agree. He wants to be a hunter. And there is a whole story around the choice of profession of the little wolfie. And this guy is presenting the method in a video, so every teacher can do it in their own way. So I would say try our materials. We provide also tips and tricks for educators and teachers, and videos how to apply the method step by step. They will be on the website. In English, most of them are already in our YouTube channel. In national languages, till the end of the project will be available. And another interesting thing that we do is a platform for self-learning, which also will be in 6 languages. This is practical learning content based on the manual and lessons learned from trainings of teachers. Now we collect feedbacks from trainings and we enrich the platform so it will be relevant to the current needs of teachers that we experimented the project, tested the project. It will be very simple tool. We have one introductory video, which is a simple way to get introduced into the learning content. Why we raise the topic, what is the situation, etc. But very simple introduction, no text, because it's, you know, everybody's in a hurry these days and texts are very tough. Even the videos are very tough already, because all of us, we are fed up of staying in front of the screen. So we found the balance to be not so long, not so, you will see. So then you have introduction into the context in this gray square, and these instruments for a self-check, for reflection that Erica mentioned. So teachers can read and then self-check before they go to the learning section, just to know where they are. And then you have the learning section. We divide it for kindergartens, for schools, and work with parents, another section. And finally, this is our YouTube channel. It will be integrated into the platform, but for now we have some of the methods already filmed, and you can see them if you are curious. And the platform, we also put some other resources from other projects, from other authors. One of them is this beautiful poster developed by Elsie Gravel. She's Canadian, and she has many, and our website will put links to them, which also can be printed, used in teachers' trainings or in kindergartens, etc. And we will use all the resources we gathered in the transnational report, and we'll put on the platform. So thank you. And go in this room to see.
But before you do, now that I have the microphone back, so before we do go into the other room, which I'm pretty sure that everyone here is very curious, where is that room and what are they going to find in there? But so as not to tease the people online who unfortunately cannot go into the other room, we would like to now open the floor to discussion for the morning session that we've had throughout the time, so that we have people online participating as well. And if you have any questions or thoughts to share with regards to the project presentation or the keynote speech in the morning, we have people here with the microphones. Just please raise your hand and they will come to you. Yes, we have a question there. Please say your name and organization if you don't mind.
Is it on? Does it work? Okay, great. I'm Mark Gärtner. I'm working together with Ellie and the others, and I've been also in the preceding project Boys in Care that Daniel Holtermann was talking about. And first of all, it's great to see that the work that we did in Boys in Care followed up with EcaRoM, while Boys in Care was mostly about professional care. Now it's the earlier childhood and it's care in a more general way, which is like really great. And thank you to Rosa to show all the materials that you produced. That is really great. And I have 2.5 questions. One is, how did the pedagogues and the teachers react to these materials when they were introduced? Did they say, okay, this is something we can use, this is how we adapt it? The second question is, since some of you mentioned that it is sometimes complicated to deal with the parents' reactions in terms of like the whole gender issue. We don't need that. You turn my son gay or whatever they say. Do you think about how to work with those parent groups? I think that is a crucial question, how to deal with that. And the other thing is, do you think of applying for a long-term study to do research on how this and other materials will what will be the outcome of this, the whole new concept of children, boys and girls and others, and care? What can be done about that, like a 10 years or even longer study? That would be, I think that would be really great to see what the outcome can be.
Okay, so we have 2.5 questions, which we will try to split among the group. Rosa, yeah.
Maybe Daniel. Where are you? Okay, so the reactions of teachers of these materials. Unexpectedly, teachers like them. I speak for Bulgaria because I know the reactions better there. They liked a lot these materials because they don't have anything till now to work on the topic, and this is powerful. This is connected with the aim of educational process. So the children were very amused to work with these materials, and what they said to us is, please produce a lot of these materials, because every child wants to touch it. Every child wants to put the dress, hat, some accessories. So we produced after that a lot to distribute to many other kindergartens. The tough question with the parents. Yes. In the platform, we developed some advices, let's say, which are based on what teachers said that is difficult for them to address parents. So we didn't use, we used some other resources, but mainly based our advices on what teachers needed. So I think for me, it's very important if we do next step of this project to involve and to enrich the part connected with parents, because this is also in every project in which is on gender, which is on prevention of violence. Like, I have the impression that parents are somehow excluded from this topic, but if we do not include all in this circle, and if we do not work together, it's a loss of time. So, yeah.
Thank you, Rosa. Thank you for the 2.5 questions. In my experience, the teachers and educators like the material as well, but I want to stress that the attitude is much as important as the material, because material tends to lie around, and if you don't have it, then you don't use it. So in my trainings, I focus on the attitude as well. The first question, second question about the parents. We wrote an a part in our manual will be about working with parents, and the concept is to establish a culture of care. So a speak up culture as well in the institutions, as well with the parents, to include, as Rosa said, everybody into our struggle, to our aim to foster caring masculinities. And the third part about long term, tomorrow our meeting will continue, and we take that in account. Of course, we would love to implement caring masculinities into official curriculums of universities and childcare educators places, but we'll see how that works. But good news from Germany here, I didn't share with everybody. We have one master thesis working explicitly on the impact assessment of our material, which is going to be written soon.
Well, those are indeed very good news. Ellie, do you have a point that you want to add? Yeah, okay.
One point I want to add, because in Austria, as we had troubles to reach childcare pedagogues in spring because of the COVID situation, we had the opportunity now to do the lectures or the training at the University of Teacher Education. So we read a lot of students and they really like the material. So I think this is a perfect way to go. We should really have the possibility to go into the education of those who become kindergarten teachers, childcare pedagogues, and yeah, primary school teachers. This is, I think this is a very relevant thing. And one more thing, as I said, we not only work with the very young, we also work with the older adults on the issue of caring masculinity. And through this, we disseminate all our products. And I got, for example, from a financial bank company, a big one from a province of Austria for Alberg, they ordered 45 books, Männer kümmern sich, from this EcaRoM project. They want to give these books to the colleagues who become fathers and mothers, you know. And I think this is also a way to go. This is also kind of parents' work. This was really fascinating to see.
Thank you, Ellie. And we have a question there. Go ahead.
Hi, I am Victoria from Caritas. So yeah, So we work in integrational program for migrants. And I have a question for Boys in Care. As I understand, there was a project earlier on, and there is another one ongoing. So my question would be about like how are participants chosen, and have you had experience with different nationalities? Because like we work with people from like Muslim people, and their like perception of how women and men do in their life are very different from us. So it would be my question: how you have you experienced like work with this nationality, and have you included them?
Yes, I answer about Bulgaria again, because in our situation, we tested one of the materials in kindergarten where there is Roma children. So we have this experience, and now we'll in the trainings we'll include Roma educational educators, mediators, sorry, because yeah, we want to have different perspective of how these materials works. It is simple, but you know, sometimes stereotypes are different in different communities. So we take into consideration this for other partners.
In terms of how we reach people, it's people who are interested. So if you would be interested in the project, you write us, and then we find a solution how it can be implemented into your context. That's the main idea. And the focus was, as you've seen in the material, to create it as diverse as possible, so that all cultural identities could be represented. So that's the background idea. So it's a culture where we are not connected to, that care is not connected to gender or culture.
And one more thing, as I said, work in different projects, we also had an European project. It was called Focus on Men. And this was explicitly focused on gender sensitive and violence preventive work with men with international family history. And we wrote a manual. It's also in English language. So a manual with including methods, relevant topics. And we also did education programs with men with international family history. And so I got to know that also among Muslim men, the diversity is incredible. So while some have, no idea about caring masculinities, others just practice it. So if you work with men from Afghanistan, like we did, or Chechnya or Syria in Austria, there is a wide range of attitudes and expectations. So we could share maybe the Foreman manual.
Okay, thank you. And then we have another question or remark over there, please.
Hello, my name is Tea Hvala. I come from Ljubljana, from the City of Women Association. I haven't seen the teaching materials yet. They look great. But from what was shown on the slides, all these characters, either female or male, were actually white. It seems like it was pretty normative in that sense. So it's great that you posed this question before about this type of intersectionality. I hope I'm wrong. I see people saying I'm wrong.
Yeah, we're already shaking our heads.
Yeah. And the second thing, I would like to comment on Ellis Cambor's introductory lecture, which was also very nice, comprehensive. But I was a bit surprised that when you spoke about how this normative masculinity is being transferred from one generation to the other, women were not mentioned at all as somebody who's obviously complicit, simply because the majority of care work is done by women. And it goes the other way too. I mean, men also reinforce and force feminine femininity to the female gender. So it's more complex, just to add.
Yeah. Ellie, would you like to comment on that?
I agree. Of course, I agree. The only thing was that I was mentioning the traditional expectation of traditional masculinity, and here Michael Kilmer said, "Boys hear the voices or pictures of men." So it's more related to this traditional aspect of masculinity and not to a wider range. So this is the only thing I can add to that.
To answer the question about the other colors, we have in the card games a lot of personages. It was not possible to show all of them now, but you'll see we have even characters in wheelchair. There is a variety of all groups are represented, be sure. Also, on the cards you'll see another characters. Take a look at the cards.
Yeah, so we have time for one more question or remark, if there are any. I'm checking the Zoom and it seems that so far there are none. We will be going soon, those of us present here, to have a look at all the materials, and you will be able to see that really we went quite wide in terms of representation in our characters. So if there are no further questions now, I would like to thank you for the first half. And before we break for lunch, those here will have the material presentation session in person. For those of you online, we are now having a lunch break until 2:30 Vilnius time. And please make sure to join us back there. We will have another plenary speech by a worldwide masculinity expert, Gary Barker. So make sure not to miss it. So those of you here, we will shortly open the door and you can go and see the very much advertised materials in the, I was going to say flesh, but mostly paper. So thank you for this half. Welcome back, everyone. We have people just taking their seats here in the room. So if you would all kindly be seated for the next presentation that we will be having online from Gary Barker, who is co-founder and president of Equimundo, the Center for Masculinities and Social Justice, United States of America. We are very, very happy that Gary could join us. I will tell you all a little secret. Gary is in Mexico now, and it's 6:30 in the morning where he is. So I don't know if you can hear this, Harry, but people are veritably impressed, as they should be, that you are about to give a speech at 6:30. We are very, very happy that you could join us, and I am giving the floor to Mr. Gary Barker.
Thanks for having me. I wish I were there in person. It's much more fun to be able to interact, outside of the screens, but thank you for accommodating this possibility of doing this virtually. I am in Mexico City. I'm at an event that's looking at anti-racism and the connections to gender equality that's organized by UNESCO. So topics quite connected to those of us who care about caring masculinities. I thought what I would do is share some research from the past few years and some reflections from our work, looking at how is it that we're raising boys? And how much are we presenting caring versions of masculinity or violent and often emotionally repressed versions of masculinities? And what does that research tell us about some things that we can do? I was pleased when I saw, the topic of this event. I do think that caring masculinities is perhaps the key way forward in our field. I think our conversations about accountability, our conversations about how to improve masculinities have started often from a place of calling men out and calling out the harm, which of course we must do. I'm not saying we should stop doing that, but I think what to fill in men's lives with and the interactions between men and others, I think affirming that we believe it's care that replaces violence and indifference, I think is an affirmation and an area of research that we need to do much more on. So I was pleased really to see the focus of this event and of the work that many of you have been doing. Let me click ahead here. Many of you may previously know us as Promundo. We changed our name earlier this year as we reflected on kind of how to be in the world, affirm our stance with gender equality, affirm our focus on equity, and also because there's several organizations that we've all grown up together called Promundo, and we thought it was useful to differentiate ourselves so we weren't kind of centering ourselves as the only group with that name, although we're all partners who have done this work. So some of the studies you'll still see our Promundo logo on there, but we are now known as Equimundo. First, I'll share a little bit of kind of what's up. How are young men in many parts of the world learning about masculinities? Some of you have probably heard of our man box study, the expression we build upon Paul Kivel's idea of a set of norms that shape men's lives and our interactions with others. We developed an attitude scale from that box, that idea that he came up with in the early 90s. We call it the man box scale. We've validated it now in several countries, working with partners, and it holds up quite well in terms of how men seem to respond to it. We've applied it mostly with young men ages 18 to 25. There's a lot of data here, and I realize I'm going to go kind of quickly over some of it. So I'm not going to go into all the details. All of the data that I'm presenting is on our website, equimundo.org. But I will kind of rush through and try to think about the big issues that come out. As we looked at the literature, as we listened to young men in a number of settings, these are the kind of, there's other things that can go into masculinity in a given setting, but these were the 7 pillars that we found most common. Self-sufficiency, the idea that I have to go it alone, do things for myself, make it on my own. Acting tough, that I've got to show that I'm always in control, that I'm never weak or afraid to step into an issue, a question, a dilemma before me. Physical attractiveness also shows up in there, how men look, how they're seen by others, and we could say that's a little bit of men feeling judged by those around them. What we might call masculine gender roles, who does what at home, who's in charge of sexual relationships, etc. 5, the issue of heterosexuality, homophobia, heteronormativity, still quite alive and often part of a pillar of hegemonic masculinity. Related to that, hypersexuality, a belief that male sexuality is uncontrollable, unstoppable, a natural force, rather than also constructed in our relationships and social context. And related to number 1 and 2, aggression and control, a belief that violence is a normal and acceptable thing to use to resolve problems, and that it is something that men should and in fact are empowered to do. We came up with a number of questions for each of those. That's in the scale that's available on our website, and then applied this in multiple surveys. We've done this in the US, the UK, Mexico, Australia, Ireland, 5 countries in the Caribbean. Some of the questions have been used in some other settings as well. Overall, I won't go into some of the nuances of the questions, but overall we find that 40 to 50% of men across some quite diverse settings were consistently in the man box. They held up those rigid views that I just shared across the questions that we used. Now, there's both good news and bad news in there. Often men said others around them, society in general, a female partner, their peer group, their parents, believed more in these views than they did. So there's a lot of men breaking out of these ideas. So I think one conclusion we can say is we spend a lot of energy as society and those around holding up these harmful ideals. Young men grapple with that all the time, and a lot of them are breaking out, but a lot of them in fact do follow and do find they get social status and meaning by holding them up. We spend a lot of energy as well, I would say, crushing men's empathy. When we've asked questions about empathy in these same surveys and others, young men feel when they see someone else around them experiencing harm, being bullied, being a victim of homophobic bullying, for example, they feel it. They feel bad, the vast majority. But 89%, just holding up the data from the US, told us they do nothing to intervene in an incident of sexual harassment or bullying because they're worried the violence they're witnessing would come toward them. And I think we know that in terms of how masculinities work, of policing, of telling us, don't question, don't step in. And we as men have a huge experience with violence around us. Some of you may know of our International Men and Gender Equality Survey. This has been carried out in more than 50 countries, inspired in part by the Norwegian Gender Equality and Quality of Life Survey. It's been carried out since 2008. So some of these data sets are from 2008. Some are as recent as last week, where we launched the results in Tunisia. Obviously, the variety of countries, the cultural contexts are quite varied. But just to hold up a few things, and again, I'm going to show some slides that have lots of data points on them, but I'm just going to give some of the big headlines from this data. One of the things we ask in the survey, certainly there's lots of questions about caregiving and caring versions of masculinity, but we also ask about exposure to violence while growing up. And here I'm just showing this, this is rather difficult to read, but what the blue shows is the men who witnessed violence against their mother when they were growing up. The red shows those who themselves experienced physical violence from parents, male peers, others around them. And the purple is the percent of men who experience both of those forms of violence. So if you look at the bottom, it's got the numbers there. That's rather difficult to read, I know. But what I want to say here is from numbers that range from 30% to 80% of men in very, very diverse contexts around the world witness or experience violence growing up. We have other surveys carried out by others on the experiences of violence growing up, and we know that boys tend to experience more physical violence. Witnessing of violence is about equal between men and women growing up across the world. But in terms of experiencing physical violence, we as men, typically, vast majority of us experience some of that growing up. We spend a lot of time in the raising boys. Sorry, I moved to the wrong direction there. Spending a lot of time using violence against boys, teaching them in the process that it's acceptable. Not surprisingly, our data finds that boys who witness violence are 3 times more likely on average, again, across cultural settings, to use violence against a female partner if they witnessed it growing up. The strongest protective factor for those who witnessed it and don't go on to carry out violence against a female partner, where we don't see that transmission of violence, is having a caring, involved male caregiver. Now, this in no way says that that's the only thing. The next strongest factor is when there was some intervention in that violence, that is, someone did something, often a woman, to say this is not okay, sought help, and was able to break the cycle that way. But those two things, both women being empowered to speak out against male violence and seeing other versions, particularly having an involved male caregiver who was not someone who was the one who carried out violence, shows up consistently as a protective factor. Also want to talk about how other factors drive more caring masculinity. We ask the question and look at which men show more equitable, connected, compassion versions of masculinities. 2 factors showed up a lot. If you had a male, whether that was your father or another man in the household, who was supportive and very involved in care work, and if you had a mother who worked outside the home. These 2 factors, as we look across so many settings, and again, it's reducing all the reduction that quantitative data analysis does. But the higher the number here shows a more positive, gender equitable and connected version of masculinity versus a less connected. So if you both had a father or a male caregiver who was involved in caring for you and a mother who was working outside the home as one indicator of her empowerment or equality compared to a male partner, you had a significantly higher gravitation toward equitable attitudes, caring and connected attitudes about masculinities. We also see a rather obvious transmission, and again, this holds up across cultures. I realize that's got a lot of data points there. The more that your father or another male did hands-on caregiving at home, the more likely you were to carry it out. So again, big headlines. If you saw growing up violent versions of masculinities, you are more likely to use it. If you saw caring versions of masculinity, you're more likely to grow into those. tells us just how much these early years matter in passing on ideas of healthy masculinities. More recently, we've been looking at the online world of boys. We've carried out 3 studies in the last 2 years in partnership with the Gina Davis Institute on Gender and Media, applying the man box, so using those same questions and pillars of masculinity, and looking at the content of the media that boys and young men consume. One of those studies, we looked at the television that boys ages 8 to 13 are watching in the US. One of those, we looked at the most popular television shows and looked at how male caregiving was portrayed. And one of those, we took the most popular gaming streaming platform, Twitch, and we looked at the masculine content or the masculinities content, of the 10 most played games. Those games mostly played by men, all 10 of the streamers, those are those who lead that gaming and the watching that you do as the participant, all of those male, all of those self-defined as heterosexual. We looked at the content of the game they were playing, as well as the content of the streaming, of the chat box. There's a lot of data in all those studies. Those are on our website, but I'll just again give some headlines. Looking at what the television that boys are watching, they're about as likely to see female characters speaking and in roles as protagonists that they are to see males. They are seeing women as competent. They are seeing women as leaders. Now, if we look at, however, at how they're seeing men, they're less likely to see men as competent caregivers, less likely to see men in hands-on parenting. They're more likely to see men doing traditional kinds of jobs. They're more likely as well to see, I jumped ahead there. They're more likely as well, this isn't on the slide here, more likely as well to see men using violence to resolve problems and to see men as mostly emotionally incompetent, that is not able to express their emotions in healthy, clearly communicated ways. There's a lot more to unpack in that study, but I wanted to offer that just as some headlines. In terms of the gaming study, and I'll just go back, this one called The Double-Edged Sword, we should be very frightened about the gaming content that boys and girls are watching, to call it that. There's a huge amount of misogyny, of homophobia, and racist language in the chats. When the streamers use that language, we saw that those who are the spectators, their use of that language increased significantly. The majority of the games, more than 75%, were about killing of others. Most of that killing in the games played on Twitch is white male characters killing others for no self-defense reasons, simply for the sheer thrill of that kind of gaming. Very little participation by streamers in calling out harmful language. At the same time, we found, and this is disturbing or perhaps positive, 3/4, we did a separate national survey in the US of men, young men, and their game watching, and the vast majority said they found a sense of community in their gaming. And in fact, they felt that that was where they could be their most authentic selves. So we have to be quite concerned if we think that is the space with that kind of language and those versions of masculinities being portrayed, that this is where they find themselves being their authentic selves. Now, we don't have the qualitative research we'd like to go with that. We think we do have to be careful of just thinking that boys are certainly not passive recipients of that information. And in fact, we saw just how much they're responsive to what happens. If there's positive language portrayed, they're often likely to switch into that. So there's a lot of performing going on of masculinities and a lot of micro context, to call it that. So I don't want to present this as somehow TV is determining and boys are watching it in very passive ways. They're making meaning of it, and they're often being critical of it, but we do need to be concerned. We've used that data to try to have conversations, and that's where engaging with the Gina Davis Institute is interesting, because they have contacts with content makers. We've done workshops with them on what's happening there, trying to encourage them, calling them out to try to do more. Thought I would also bring up the issue of the connection. I'm looking at time here, got just a few more minutes, of how men are caring for themselves. Looking at how we care for others and how we care for ourselves. We did a study during COVID of men's self-care and the connection of that self-care and care for others. The kinds of care that we as adult men do in the US that is most common in terms of caring for ourselves is physical. The physical activity, body care, that men do on an average of 4 times a week. Emotional and mental care, that is, do you take some time to meditate, to think about how you're doing, to read something that inspires you? Still quite frequently, but not as high, 3 times a week. When we ask questions about, do you reach out to others when you're feeling down or when you feel the need to connect? During COVID, this was the least likely to happen, just 2 times a week. What we did find is that if men are attuned to our own needs, and particularly our emotional needs, we're more likely to care for others. So this bar shows more or less if you did physical care at the higher end, you did some more caring for your aging parents. If you were more connected to others or cared for yourself, you were more likely to do multiple forms of care. Again, fairly obvious. If men are attuned to the fact that we're emotional beings that need support and care, that we obviously need physical care, but we also need to care for how we connect with others, for how we're feeling, for when we may be feeling down or anxious or fearful, that we need help with that. We seem to be more compassionate and connected and caring of others. Useful to think as well about that we do need to, in a way, give men and boys permission to care for themselves as we call them to be more caring for others. Did a piece of research that is leading to our global boyhood initiative that we did with the US, and we've just applied this as well in France, and we're carrying this out in Mexico, where I am at the moment working with our partners, looking at parents and their concerns about their sons. This study is also on our website. I'm not going to go into many details, but it was disturbing that nearly 50% of parents think that their sons are uncomfortable showing love. Very higher rates of other things, of showing that they're lonely or scared. But as we think about caring and connection, that half of parents think that their sons, these are random sample of parents of sons, mothers and fathers and other caregivers of sons in the US, sons ages 8 to 13. Quite disturbing that nearly 50% said, my son is uncomfortable showing love. I happen to feel that's perhaps the strongest and most important emotion that we need to be able to share, and quite disturbing that parents said that. Parents perceiving and often being part of the construction of emotionally repressive versions of manhood, believing that their sons have to show they're physically strong, that he wants to do sports, that he has to fit in, he has to be emotionally strong, which when we did the testing of that, it meant stoic essentially, that he's got to act typically male. They feel that he perceives that pressure. We asked them separately if they believed in those things, and the majority did. So I want to end on this one. What do we do with this? We should be quite disturbed about how we're raising our sons. It's not that we're necessarily doing good jobs of creating safe spaces and empowered worlds and opportunities for our daughters, but we should be worried about how much energy goes into and effort goes into and creation of meaning in the lives of boys that is about repressing our caring, empathetic selves. One, we believe that very obviously we need to have intentional and compassionate conversations about masculinity, to build that into work in schools and in media, in mass media, hence our conversations with colleagues who are connected in the world of Hollywood and that content creation. But we need to make it deliberate. It's not simply calling out the harm, that we're going to have those intentional conversations about what we want in caring masculinity. There's a huge amount to be done, secondly, around caregiving. This is not to say that, every boy needs a father or needs a male role model around. I do not believe that's the case. But I do believe we need to talk a lot more. And I think the efforts, particularly in Scandinavia and parts of Europe, where there's been more participation by men in the daily care of children, is something that needs to be global. But it's not only being present, it is how we are present as male caregivers and female caregivers in making healthy masculinities with our sons. Third, I think we have to acknowledge the trauma and mental health issues in men's lives. The violence we experience growing up is traumatic. There's different levels of trauma, and I don't want to overuse that term, but I do think we look at boys' lives with more empathy and compassion if we acknowledge that our exposure, our witnessing of and our experiencing of violence is a traumatic experience. Fourth, as I hinted at before, I think we need to think about men's self-care. it is a pathway to us being more careful of others. And I think that's something to think about. And finally, I do think it's important to step into believing that we come into the world wanting to be empathetic and caring, that is where we start from, and that our work is about helping boys and men be their best selves, be their best caring and respectful selves. We also do a lot of work on care policies. Many of you know about our Men Care campaign, and we've come up with a set of recommendations. I'm mindful of time, so I am going to move off of that. That is part of our last State of the World's Fathers report of thinking about how we get governments to not only do the parental leave policies and national care policies, but Action 5 is about how do we create an ethic of male care in schools and media, sports spaces, the places where we make boyhood. We need to deliberately have in place policies that promote an ethic of male care. It doesn't just fall out of the sky. We need to make it something that boys see, that we want and expect of them, that we teach and model. I mentioned earlier, we've started a new initiative that we're building some new research with partners in a number of countries, trying to say, what would it look like to put into the world this idea of an ethic of healthy, connected boyhood? Doing work with partners to gather some research with parents and with boys, looking at the media that boys are consuming, and then working together with partners both around programmatic interventions, but also looking at how do we put in the media different social messaging around boyhood. We're just starting this work, so I don't have much to share except from that research that's framing it, but really trying to step into that question of how do we present an ethic of care to boys ages 4 to 12. And I'll stop with this, which is, we asked at the beginning of COVID boys in both a conservative Republican voting families and also more progressive voting families in the US, how they describe good manhood, whether we use the word good, sometimes we use good or not, but it didn't really matter. Both sets, conservative or more progressive, had very positive words to say about what being a man meant. There were few that said, I have to carry a gun and cause harm to people. They were positive words. So we have to ask, these were boys ages 9 to 11. So I think we have some reason to be hopeful that in spite of all that we do to bombard boys with harmful ideas, there's a huge amount of resistance and resilience that I think we need to draw on. And I want to end on that hopeful note because there's a lot of production of the negative views about masculinity, but I think we have to have deep faith that boys and girls with our support can become the caring, connected, helpful, kind, nice, respectful, the words they used, that exists there. We're not making this up. We're not teaching them to be something that they don't already perceive as valuable. I will stop there for a few comments, and thanks for inviting me to share these reflections.
Yeah, it's on. Thank you very much, Gary. I'm supposed to look at the camera, but I feel like I should look back because that's where Gary is. So we have time for 1 or 2 questions. This is a unique opportunity, and I suggest you use that. Please raise your hand and we'll get the microphone to you. Or comments. Comments are also welcome.
Hi. So I'm Victoria, and I'm from Caritas. Oh, yes, here's the camera. Yeah,
Fine.
sorry. So I had a question. You talked about like media and like gaming. What about the ads? Because like there's a lot of them, and that's really the place where you can't control it. Because as a parent, maybe you can filter out some, I don't know, movies, maybe some games, but what to do with ads when they are everywhere, even on the streets, in like, I don't know, in the movies, in TV, it's everywhere. And that's the place where like toxic masculinity flourishes, because like there's a lot talk about like man is strong, man is not supposed to cry. If you use this this thing, you will be strong and cool. So I don't know, like what's the solution for ads, and how can we even like control how kids see them?
Yeah.
Because like, yeah, I don't know, maybe you have like some ideas.
I mean, yeah, I think it's a, I mean, I need to confess from the beginning, I'm not a media studies expert. We have partnered with media studies experts. And I think what we've often done, as we do, too often as social science researchers, is we go for the data that's easiest to gather. There are data on which television shows and which streaming is most watched by different age segments and by sex. So you can find data in the US and many countries around which TV and streaming is most common. You can find that about gaming as well. You can look at which films had the most watch. So those are easier, whereas the ad world, because it happens in so many spaces, it's far more difficult to do this kind of quantitative analysis that we did. What we're stepping into is some qualitative research next year with young men and kind of who they perceive as sources of influence. So rather than just using the quantitative data we can find, to start from you telling us what you watch and where you get your cues from it. The other piece, I think you're absolutely right about ads. The challenge, of course, from studying them is just like they now show up on, any screen that goes into hold. There's 14 things happening there. It's really, it is so ubiquitous that it's really hard to measure. The other space that we want to look at is influencers. We're looking at Andrew Tate and his 10 million plus followers, Jordan Peterson and his 3 million plus followers, Joe Rogan. I'm mentioning US and Canadian ones, but there are many others. And again, to step into that, and it's not just the negative masculinities and how many folks follow, but I think we have to look at the meaning that men make of it. I was just with some boys in a school in the UK 3 weeks back, where we're testing a methodology for questioning harmful masculinities. And many of the boys could talk about looking at Andrew Tate, and we looked on with a certain horror about what he represents. But many times they could look and say, well, I like this because he gives me some ideas on how I can work on building up my body, but he's kind of stupid when he talks about girls. So I think, we also have to believe that 12 and 13-year-old and younger boys and girls can come into looking at media in critical ways. And I think we've got to look at where it's probably impossible. I think we do need more kinds of controls on what boys are watching, ads as well. But I think we need to do more research on kind of the meaning that boys are making out of that. Sorry, that was a long response and probably answered an additional question, but you provoked me on where we've been thinking of where to go next with this.
Thank you, Gary. We have another comment in the back there, right?
Hello, Gary. Thank you for your presentation. I really enjoyed you talking with empathy for boys and men. I really agree with you that there's a lot of trauma in men, and we're not talking enough about that. Maybe you could comment more about the best initiatives or practices that you see for working with men and trauma.
Yeah, thanks for asking that. We did we did a long literature review and consulted some experts in the trauma field. There's a paper that's on our website, and I can share that link. A few things to think about. One, we know that levels of trauma, depression, most mental health issues show up as much in men as they do in women, depending on the data set we're looking at. Partly, one of the biggest challenges is creating a safe space for men to say that was traumatic for me, and to acknowledge and be able to have the emotional language to talk about it. That is both in men and boys who have experienced trauma, and it's in those of us who are service providers in creating that safe space to acknowledge trauma that men have faced. And I think we see that whether it's experiencing sexual violence growing up or as adults, whether it's witnessing violence at home, is creating within the service sector, those of us who should be providing services to men and boys, the space that says we can acknowledge, you can talk about, you are safe sharing that with me. I think the models that we've seen most effective, we have looked and helped support, build some models in post-conflict settings. Perhaps in some of the settings where trauma is the worst, I think there's been some very creative psychologists. We've been blessed to partner with a group called the Living Peace Institute in the Democratic Republic of Congo, DRC, in the eastern region. And colleagues there, looking at the impact of 2 decades of conflict, came up with a model that's about building support, group support, where men can talk about trauma, and where about 1/3 of the members in the group are individuals who show higher coping skills, men like them, who, when they face similar traumas, have shown higher coping skills. So there's a peer influence of me being with men like me who show higher coping, if you want to call it that, in the face of trauma and adverse life experiences, and to be able to learn in a setting like that from other individuals who show higher coping. I know often in our work with men who have used violence against women, for example, we're only putting men who have used violence against women together with often 1 or 2 facilitators. And we think it's really important to show kind of men who do have some good strategies for how they have dealt with adversity and trauma. So one would be just answering simply your question, making it visible how men express and experience trauma, being able more aware as mental health professionals, particularly of how men express trauma. Men's depression is more often expressed as violence. And I think we have trouble acknowledging that men's expression of violence, while we want to call them out, is often also an expression of trauma or depression. And third, I would say that lesson around when we do group interventions, to do them in ways that include some higher coping individuals. That's not the language we use in the group setting, but it's what we, as those who design those groups, try to do with them. I hope that's useful. I think it's a field that needs much more work.
Thank you, Gary. The camera was on me, but I can tell you that there was nodding and affirmation that it was useful indeed. I am mindful of time, though. I believe that if we were to go on, I assume there would be more points of discussion, but we have limited time. Thank you very much, Gary, for being here. My vowels and consonants are getting a bit messier as, it's afternoon for me, Gary. It's not morning, it's afternoon. I've been doing this for quite some time. So thank you for being here. I hope you stay on for another hour while we have our panel discussion if you have the time. Everyone, I think another round of applause for Gary.
Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be able to connect.
Thank you very much, Gary. And we are now moving on to our panel discussion. And I would like to invite Erika Bernacchi from Istituto degli Innocenti, you saw Erika before, to moderate this lovely discussion. Take it away.
All the others as well. Yes, good morning again. I think that all the panelists can join me and we can sit all here at the same time. Yeah, otherwise, why shouldn't have you put the chairs? So please come. Yeah. So yes, we are coming to a close of the conference, and the idea of this last panel was to ask the question, how is it possible to foster a cooperation between stakeholders in order to promote the concept of caring masculinities in early education and primary schools? So basically, how to put the concept of caring masculinities in practice into different settings, and how to foster the cooperation between different stakeholders. So I'm very glad that we have such a rich and diversified panel today. We have representatives from different ministries, from academia, researchers, psychologists, practitioners, and so on. So we, among the partners, we decided that we would ask one question to each panelist. So I would like to start with the representative of the ministry. So I will introduce each person while I'm asking them the questions. And I also would like to ask you not to go beyond 10 minutes maximum, because we would like to have a little bit of time at the end for further questions from the audience. So, yes, we will start with ministry representative, and I will introduce you to Elisabeth Zissler and Benedikt Treschnitzer. So Elisabeth Zissler, since 2014, is a member of the Department for Equality and Diversity Management, and she is responsible for gender-sensitive vocational orientation, among other things. And she is also a member of the steering group of the Boys' Day Austria initiative on behalf of the Federal Ministry of Education, Science and Research. And the Boys' Day by itself is in the responsibility of the Ministry of Social Affairs. Benedikt Treschnitzer studied film and gender studies in Vienna, and he has been working at the Austrian Ministry of Social Affairs since 2017 in the Department for Diversity and Equal Opportunities. And the focus of his work is currently on the prevention of male violence against women and the promotion of male youth in care and education profession. So to both of you, I would like to ask you, why do you think that it is important to fund projects that put into practice the concept of care in masculinities, and also if you wish to talk about any innovative project in this area? So please, Elisa.
Yeah, I would like to tell you about in which boys projects we are involved at the moment. This is the Boys' Day. Responsible is the Ministry of Social Affairs. Also, we are partners in this project, the Boys in Care project and the EcaRoM project. And we try to implement all these projects in the University of Trainings, also of teacher training. So we have different targets group in this University of Teacher Trainings. This is for Boys' Day, we have the practice schools. In Boys in Care, we had the teachers for vocational orientation, and in EcaRoM, we implemented the departments for elementary and primary school levels. And also, I think it's very important to fund projects like this, because as we see in EcaRoM, there are produced many materials which are really good. And I think teachers don't have materials. I see it on the education fairs. We have one a year, also once a year, and they are going very good. For example, from Boys in Care, the handbook and the learning lessons, the scenarios. Yeah, and what I would like to say is also that we should try to work together, or to bring in also girls and women. I think it's not enough to reduce the gender gap for funding a lot of MINT projects. We heard it today, and in Austria it is so. But on the other side, we have flags of boys projects. So what will be new also is we will found a network of role models for teachers within the Boys' Day community. We will start it in March, and I think this would be and we have also included the teacher training institutions where women are, so we can combine it and start a pilot project also. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I think that the role of ministry is really crucial, and it does make a difference if you have like ministries supporting and funding national initiatives in comparison to having like small projects funded by NGOs that then end up. And I also would like to stress that for instance, in the Boys in Care project, the previous project, we took the Boys' Day initiative as a model that we would like to develop in the other countries, although it is much more difficult because we don't have a national initiative as the Boys' Day, which is happening in Germany and in Austria. So that would really make a difference if we could do this kind of projects in other countries as well. So thank you for your contribution. And so maybe Benedikt, you would like to continue this reflection.
Yeah, thank you, Erika, for the introduction. The question was why it's important. I think if you paid attention the whole day, I wouldn't have to speak anymore, but no, just kidding. For us, the Ministry of Social Affairs, we have a big focus on the prevention of male violence against women. And as Ellie pointed out, and others as well, that if you teach young boys how to care, then they will be less likely to be violent in the future. So we have this kind of connection to this topic. Also, for me personally, I think it's quite important for the boys themselves, just for themselves, without any consequence in society, how it helps society as a whole, just for them, because if you care, it does something with yourself and it does something for you. So that's also a point which could be addressed in the future a little bit more. What I find quite interesting today, what I heard, was the occupational map. I think Daniel talked about it, because as Elisabeth said, we have this project, the Boys Day, which is a career orientation day for boys, where they can get to know jobs in the care and in the educational sector, which are, as we had, usually taken up by women. And the occupational map said that boys already deselect this kind of jobs at the age of 6 to 10 because of gender. And the boys, they starts at 12. So also an important age, because then they, as we saw, choose their own path. But maybe we can also have some more focus on this early part. That's something I can take with me into the ministry. Yeah, I think that's the things I took home the most. And what Gary Baker said, Arca, sorry, said about the whole online gaming world, which I'm very much involved in as a private person. I think I have a totally different experience, like when you're in your bubble and you spend your time on Twitch, then you don't and watch these kind of streamers, then you don't get this kind of experience. But it was interesting to see when you are looking at it from a scientific lens, then you find out this whole macho type of streamers that are out there. And I also play this kind of games, which he mentioned, the very bad ones where you shoot other people before they shoot you. And I have to say, there's, when I'm in this kind of settings, always very little knowledge about this kind of games, and they're always put in some kind of corner where you don't want to look too closely, but they're actually quite fun. And there's actually a lot of team play involved and strategy, and yeah, just wanted to say this.
Thank you. Yes, and yeah, concerning the topic of caring masculinity as also a way to prevent male violence and gender-based violence, I would like to take the occasion to say that some of the partners of this project are also involved in another project, which is called Carmia, Caring Masculinities in Action. This is a bit of an advertisement, which has exactly the aim of involving boys through peer education in making them allies in order to prevent gender-based violence. So this is definitely another area on which we are working and is key.
Yes, we also funding this project. So
okay,
yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much for funding our projects. That's so important. Thank you. So anyway.
No, yeah, it's also important for the Ministry of Social Affairs to have this kind of focus, because actually Austria has a very high murder rate of women. So, and they're usually murdered because the murderers are usually the partners or ex-partners. So it's a typical femicide. They get killed because they're women, and it's a really big problem in Austria. It has one of the highest rates in all of the European Union, and so that's where we have the focus right now.
Thank you. Yeah, the same goes with Italy. We have a high rate of feminicide. We have the 25th of November celebration now, so it was pretty much on the media as well. Okay, so now we can go to university, to academia, and I'm very glad to have here today Dr. Ernesto Vasquez del Aguila. Is an assistant professor and director of teaching and learning at University College of Dublin, Ireland. He's a medical anthropologist with a PhD from Columbia University, and he has been working on and publishing on areas of masculinities, especially on transnational migration, sexual and reproductive rights, and global health. And let me allow a personal note here. Ernesto was my professor of masculinity studies in Ireland at UCD. And so like he really introduced me to this field of study, so I owe him deep gratitude for teaching me this key area. And so if I'm here today, is definitely also thanks to him. And having said that, the question for you is, which do you think are the most innovative aspects of the concept of caring masculinities in order to advance gender equality and promote nonviolent forms of masculinities, and how you think this concept could be enhanced in academic courses?
Thank you, Erika, for such a warm introduction, and so delighted to see you thriving in the area. Before I start, let me tell you something. I've been teaching masculinities for more than 10 years. It's a very popular class with waiting lists and all that. But the sad part is that 80 or 90% of my students are women. So we are losing men. So the Space University is too late to engage men. So I'm delighted that you are actually tackling masculinities involving boys at such an early age, which is part of my crusade. You know, how to engage, how to involve men in this topic. So what caring masculinity brings to gender equality? I think first, it gives us a language, it gives us a framework to study caring, to study nurturing in public and domestic spheres. Complements previous frameworks that didn't include this aspect, didn't focus on these aspects of caring and nurturing. So that will be my first point. How important, as I said, is to have these tools to be analyzing and to be fighting domestic and public patriarchy. What else? Caring masculinity rejects the idea that caring or nurturing is something natural, something that we are born with, but something that we learn. So invite us to reflect how we are teaching girls caring. What are the dolls when we are giving girls dolls and boys cars? That's something that sounds harmful. Actually, is telling us how we start at such an early age teaching nurturing and caring, and then we think we society think that is natural, that girls were born with that instinct of motherhood or caring. And in contrast, also tell us that aggression is not something that we men are born with, but something that we learn. So how we switch that and how we teach boys and young men also that caring is something that is part of masculinity. What else? Something that I think is really important and particular concern, because I think it's a war that we are losing, is the war against the manosphere. You know, the manosphere is this collection of blogs, online chattings, etc., that men from all different backgrounds, that it goes from hegemonic men, but also gay men, minority men, and women, and participating against gender equality. So this, I think the mistake that we're making is that we are thinking that the manosphere is a space for crazy people. Not all of them are crazy people. Sorry. So not all of people in the manosphere are crazy people. You know, we have people as Gary Baker was showing, was mentioning, like Jordan Peterson, which is an incredibly influential person that attracts students. And I was always, every year, I'm surprised when kind well educated of my male students, and some of my women students are attracted to this guy. So what are the supporters, the intellectual supporters of the manosphere? They are tackling emotionality, not the lack of men, the lack of contact with men, with father figures or male figures in their life. Something that is incredibly important to talk in masculinity studies, but they don't want to engage, they don't want to tackle gender equality. So that's something that Caring Masculinities Against bring to the topic. So yes, we should be talking about emotions and the importance of emotionality in men's lives, but we should be tackling that should be together with the discussion of gender equality and the privilege that men enjoy just by sitting in this chair. You know, that's what Connell called the patriarchal dividend. I don't need to be a bad man. I don't need to be an awful person to enjoy the patriarchy. I'm just sitting in this chair, and just by that, I'm enjoying some benefits of that. What else? I think also show us that men around the globe, not just in the global north, but also in the global south, are already doing work on caring. Studies around the globe are using this framework to show how men are caring. For instance, HIV negative men in Uganda caring for their HIV positive wives, fathers in Latin America, etc., caring for their children. So I think it's an invitation also for the coloniality to start looking at how the global south and men in the global south, without having this language, without having this framework, are already participating in caring masculinities and caring for others. How this concept could be enhanced within the academic courses. I think, first of all, we need to really think that we need to involve men in gender. We don't engage men and boys in gender, we are losing the battle. And something that is a particular challenge for me in my courses. I do focus groups. I include a session on sports and masculinities, game and masculinities, as it still is don't have young men in my classes. You know, I'm trying not to take personally. What else? I think something important of this framework is that invite us to look not just at the cultural aspects of gender, of caring, things that we were discussing so far, but also at the institutional or structural factors. If we take fatherhood as an example, for instance, we could see that fatherhood has a cultural dimension. So how we involve, how we invite men to be more caring at home or involved in domestic chores, not just collaborating at home, but really participating as caregivers, but also working at policy level. If we don't give fathers parental leave, for instance, we cannot be just tackling at cultural issues. What else? Embed caring masculinities in a bigger picture on intersectionality and the coloniality. Intersectionality, we discussed already in the morning how important it is to frame gender and with other intersecting factors such as race, social class, migrant status, etc. And in terms of the coloniality, to even reflect that we are learning, that we know is a fraction what the world is producing, because we don't speak other languages beyond the ones we are speaking here. And so we also to engage with the studies, with the work that the Global South is doing. And even though I'm from Ireland, I'm originally from Peru, so I'm bringing my Global South flag also here. What else? I think caring masculinities also give us a framework opportunity to challenge the framework of inclusive masculinities, who was an incredibly attractive framework that many scholars were bought into that. But this framework is incredibly dangerous because it gives us the illusion that we are living in a post-equality era, that post-homophobia, so everything is fine, and it's an incredibly attractive framework because we all want to hear positive things. So caring masculinity challenges that framework. It says no, right? We are still, we cannot put our guard down. We still need to continue battling in terms of gender equality. What else? Something that I'm working at the moment is intergenerational solidarity. I think it's really important to work on that, to provide inclusive role models for younger men, for younger boys. I think boys need to hear, need to learn that being an artist, being a yogi, being a cook, etc., are as valid role models as being an engineer. My final remark, I think, is something based on my experience as researcher, and this is a window of opportunity, I think, is I love the framework of responsibility. So when we talked with regular men outside this bubble of us who are already contaminated by gender equality, what's something that engage men, regardless of if they are traditional or more egalitarian, is the notion of responsibility. But the problem with that is that they usually only attach to being a provider or to being a protector. So how, and this is our challenge, how we can add caring to that framework, So a responsible man is someone who, yes, is a provider, a protector, but also is a care. And guess the warning there, and asking you, because I think it's really easy to fall into something, into the trap of the real man easy box, right? So you will see in ads with really good intentions, saying, for instance, a real man doesn't buy sex. A real man is a carer. That's incredibly dangerous because who is a real man? We are reinforcing hegemonic notions there. So being a responsible man, I think, is an opportunity to engage regular men, engage boys in caring for others, for themselves, and also for our planet. Thank you.
Thank you, Ernesto. Yes, thank you for your very rich reflections. And I just want to pick one point, the one of decoloniality, because it makes us reflect that oftentimes, we just don't see a number of things that happens outside our global north. And it made me think to some images that we showed in one of our trainings, in which we showed some refugee men with their little children, providing and caring for their little children while we're fleeing from a war situation or other kind of difficult situation. And that is important because oftentimes when we speak about like migrant and refugees, men, there's the tendency to emphasize only the bad side. And those images were going in the opposite direction, and sometimes we just don't see them. So yeah, thank you for this reminder. And now I would like to pass the floor to Romeo Bissutti, and we are really very glad to have you here because you have an incredible experience of working on these issues. Romeo Bissutti is clinical and health psychologist and psychotherapist, head of Men's Health Center, head of White Ribbon Austria, board member of DMO, which is an umbrella organization for men's work in Austria. So Romeo Bissutti has been working since more than 20 years on men's issue, men's counseling, violence prevention, men's health, boys' work, career, masculinities, and so on and so on. I won't read everything.
Please stop.
But we really want to take advantage of your experience to ask you, which do you think are the most innovative projects, concept, ideas to put in practice caring masculinity?
Thank you very much for that much too long introduction. I should have given you shorter notes, just my name or my initials, and that's it. Thank you very much for this very interesting conference and for the materials and the invitation. That's great practice, and also of the ministries who are giving support of that. I was asking myself what could I add to all the things that are already here, and I wanted to mention maybe two projects. because in the Men's Health Center, we try to focus on target groups which are social disadvantaged target groups, and to involve like normal males, so social disadvantaged males, because sometimes, I don't know how you feel about it, but sometimes the issue about caring masculinity seems like a Bobo style of a project. What is the word, like a middle class, white middle class, male, educated male kind stuff of issue. And so I want to bring you two projects we were working on. One project was called, the German title is Papa macht mit. I was trying to search, coming here to translate, is like get Papa involved, or Papa is part of it, Papa takes care, something like this. And what is the project? It's very easy. It's a very simple project, and you can do it if you are in a context or in an institution like that. You can easily do it. What is the core of the project is we involved fathers in kindergartens, elementary schools, sports clubs, Sportvereine, sport clubs, and Horte. I don't know what Horte is like afternoon, where the children are in the afternoon. And we involved the fathers that did take time for one afternoon, maybe for one whole day. We tried to make it even with a sleepover, but this was too high, the goal. But to make an activity with the children for one afternoon. And they came together with the children, and they asked the children, what do you want to do? And the children said, hey, I want to do this and that. And so they were baking cookies, they were making jewelries for the mothers or maybe partners. They were making they built some bird houses, different things, like what children like to do. But the event was that one afternoon, there were just fathers coming together to the kindergarten, elementary school, and all that kind of stuff. And they were experiencing themselves as caregivers for the children. This was such an easy way for them to bring out the good side. And it was very easy. And the kindergartens for children, elementary schools, they were so happy to get in contact with the fathers, because very often, I don't know how your experiences are, but for the teachers, it's always like, yeah, we're always speaking with the mothers, but where are the fathers, blah, blah. And so it was very easy to get in contact. And we also qualified the teachers to how to do that programs. And still, in some elementary schools, they are still doing twice a year those afternoons. It seems like nothing. I mean, it's even if you compare it, of course, to the daily work that the mothers are doing in caregiving, but it gives them the fathers an identity project. They experience themselves as caregivers. It's interesting for the children, for the institution. So this is interesting. One man who was jobless, he said he never spent so much time with his children. And he's jobless, you know what I mean? So it's kind of an identity program. So I think it could be interesting to focus on men, like the man from the street, the everyday man, and not only on those men, and to make it easy for them to bring out good sides. So which is always what I try to focus on my work. Of course, we are looking at all the violence and the bad stuff happening, but if we reach out for men, we have to give them a chance to make it easy to bring out the good side, to make it easy to be a pro-feminist man, you know what I mean? To make it easy for the man, so that it's easy to say, oh, that's selbstverständlich. I do that. Yeah, of course I do that, you know? And the second project I want to mention, you brought me to that idea because this is a special kind of thing. Because we were mentioning about the North and South and white male issue. And I think it's important for our practical projects that we, as a white male, as a white middle class male, to get involved in project where you feel somehow also unsure in the best way. What do I mean about that? I worked in the last 2.5-3 years with male target groups from Somalia, Egypt, Sudan, Nigeria, and Ghana to the issue of female genital mutilation and cutting, and to involve men to raise their voice against FGM cutting, because in countries like Somalia or Egypt, it's like 98 to 99% of the women and girls have been victims of FGM cutting. And you know, working with a target group, and you come there as a white male with Christian background, and you can I'm atheist, and so if it's better if I would say I'm a Christian background than atheist, you know what I mean? Because it's worse if you don't have any God, yeah, whatever. If someone asks me, I always say I'm Buddhist, so this works somehow. This is some Buddhist is more psychology than religion. And to go there and to face their, you know, it's part, they believe that it's part of their identity, of their religious identity. It's part of their gender role, because the FJMC is has a long tradition on the female side, you know, it's the grandmothers and the aunts giving that, and the men, they have a lot of myth about it, and it's very crazy. And to give yourself some time and give them the men some time to come together. And after some years, we qualified 18 peers in those communities to fight against FGM cutting. And now in Vienna, one of the colleagues is now a co-worker of mine, and he makes once a week, there's a workshop against FGM cutting with male target groups. And how did we involve the men? We worked about men's health issues, that we started with things that was for the health of the man important, and then about family health, psychology health, and then like they want to become fathers. And then we talked about issues about giving birth. And so we were very quick, very near to the issue. And it was very important also to have an imam. We had 2 imams in the group to bring out that this has nothing to do with Muslim religion and all this kind of stuff. But what I wanted to show is I learned so much from them as they learned from me. And it was like how to say, I was in German, I say, go somewhere and make your hands dirty. You know what I mean? Go somewhere where you feel unsure, where you're not like in your bubble and you say, yes, blah, 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 I know what masculinity. But I find it always interesting to go somewhere where I have a lot of question marks. I know what I want to bring up and to get in contact. And these are just 2 experiences, because this is another kind of caring masculinities, because those men, they say, I never will make FJMC to my girls, and everyone I know, I tell them the truth about FJMC. This is so important. This is kind of a caring masculinities, but on a very special target group. Yeah, just 2 experiences we have.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed your idea of going places where you feel somehow unsure. That's an interesting point, because yes, we were saying before that sometimes we feel as if we are in a bubble, that we are speaking the same language, which is good and important, but it is also important to go in more difficult places and to confront with different realities. And of course, you must do it with like being aware of your own power position and all of that, but then still do it. And this is an incredible project. It would be interesting to see then in terms of percentages also how much effective it has been. And yeah, I'm sure it will. So yeah, thank you. And so now I would like to turn to Vilana Pilinkaite Sotirovic. We have been working in other projects together, and Vilana is the gender expert at the Center for Equality Advancement and researcher at the Lithuanian Center for Social Sciences. And she has contributed to a number of national and international studies on men's role in gender equality policies, gender mainstreaming in education, and gender-based violence. And so the question that I would like to ask you is little bit more general. So which do you think are the forms of cooperation that are most needed between different stakeholders, such as ministry, university, organizations, in order to promote the concept of caring masculinities?
So thank you, Erika, very much. And hello, everybody, those whom I know and whom I met today. And thank you for the question, because it's good that it is a bit more general. And I was thinking, what shall we discuss today? And when it comes to cooperation between different stakeholders, it brings me to some ideas that produced in the feminist academia about velvet triangle. I think everybody knows that, cooperation between policy stakeholders, like ministers, academia, and NGOs. And I was thinking, how fruitful this cooperation could be if we would really work together, but not only declare, because on the declarative discourse, it is more or less said that, yeah, we are cooperating with NGOs, we are cooperating with scientist community. But when it comes to practice, usually we see that, well, ministries knows how they should work. And they, well, on the one hand, of course, they listen, but on the other hand, how this, effectively they listen and take what the scientist community and civil society discusses and produces. And some examples, for example, what I experienced while doing both the research work and also advocacy work, that, it's very much depending how policies frame gender equality policy. Because what we see from the policy discourse, especially when you go, for example, to Minister of Education, they always declare that we are supporting gender equality and we promote gender equality policies. But when you look to the frame, how the problem is framed, so basically it's about anti-discrimination only anti-discrimination. So it's very narrow, very legalistic attitude. And we don't see the holistic, frame. For example, when we come to education, we don't see how this different segregation on the gender to professions, how it affects labor market. We don't see it. We don't see, for example, how reconciliation of family and work affects also gender equality and the other spheres. Because when it comes to the policy, for example, in Lithuanian case, reconciliation of family and work, it is the whole objective is to support family institution. That shocked me when I read in the documents a lot. And they were very successful because they declared this objective in the beginning of 2010. And when we had the survey last year in 2020 on the attitudes of women and men to reconciliation of family and work, we see that the traditional roles enhanced, strengthened even. So where is gender equality in this sense? On the other hand, yeah, the scientific community can help in framing gender equality, because on the one hand, we also have the programs how to promote women in STEM professions. And that was progressing and we see certain results, but we don't have opposite, how to progress men in care professions. And this is very much lacking. So why the project that we did in Boys in Care somehow already, pushed kind of discourse that we need to talk about this. In some countries it's more progressed and in some countries not very much progressed, but we are on the track, engaging both the scientific community and NGOs, which are like an experimental lab that can, with the project, test the concept on caring masculinity, on more complex gender equality, on the materials that we saw today, that these are tested concepts which worked, which were adopted, adjusted to the national context, but it's already kind of product that the policies can take and go further on. I mean, that, expanding, improving, and again, working together with 3 of different actors just to, make this progress, and that the policies would become not only from top down, but also bottom up, like doing this combination. So I think that this, well, feminist velvet triangle might work if more like stronger cooperation or relationships would be like more established and more communication, better communication would go.
Thank you, Villana. Yes, I definitely agree that it pretty much depends on how you frame this gender equality discourse. So thank you for bringing up this point. And now, last but not least, we have Daniel. So you know Daniel already, but anyway, a few words about him as well. Daniel Holterman, you know, is researcher at the SENS Institute for Education and Research. He's a sociologist, pedagogue, and trainer. And he works on gender reflective pedagogy, critical and caring masculinities in research, theory, and practice. And he has been a wonderful coordinator of our project. And as we say, we are gonna miss him a lot. Yeah, well, anyway, Daniel, like you are the last in the panel, and yes, the initial idea was to, if you can tell us some reflection about the training that you did in the EcaRoM project, but if you also have other insights based on what was raised in this panel, just feel free to tell us about.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Erika. I'll be short because I had my 20 minutes already. And when I listened to you and thought about the trainings I gave, what I found really interesting to work with different target groups. I was working with ECEC, so childcare pedagogues, and I was working in primary schools. And the important thing was to find the right language. And that was first to listen to the people. What are the words? What is your reality? How are you talking about things? And there's a difference between childcare pedagogues and primary school teachers. And I really, it was really like for me new working with that target group. But I got from this that this is really important if we want to promote our topic. Let's find the way people speak and how to address people to bring caring masculinities, especially to men. As you were mentioning, I realized as well, if I do courses and give lectures, then I mainly talk to women, which is wonderful, but I miss the men too. So perhaps that would be a good idea to focus on what language we use and when we use it, and make it as simple as possible, but not too simple. And focus on the appealing aspect of caring masculinities, which is the positive side. Because if we are all getting more rid of the rigid gender norms, it means more freedom, more community, and more peace for everybody. And I think that is more appealing than to fight against anti-feminist, which is very important. But we need to see as well what we can gain with it, and that is, I think, how we're going to reach people and how we're going to connect between the different stakeholders. And I think that's it for me now.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. And like this issue of the appealing side of caring masculinities makes me think to the cause of masculinity that we have been working a lot with the framework of Messner, you know, like the privileges, the cost and diversity. So like the cost of masculinity is high. And so if you reflect on this can be appealing to like kind of liberating ourselves from these costs, right? Okay, so now we have some time, which is good. And so we can open the floor for comments, questions, but also, yes.
Sorry, I already spoke, but I was so glad about something Ernesto brought up that I thought I should add something. The whole thing with the manosphere, the online world, which is, I think, everybody's spending more and more time online, and also the kids and the boys. And so I think the whole manosphere thing is something where you should have more focus on it in research and in projects to work with it. And you can also make a bridge to the thing about the online gaming world we heard before, and from Gary, that it's kind of, you start as a child playing online games, and then by 15 years later, you end up being an insolent, killing 5 people. And then you're called a lone wolf, and nobody really wants to look at where you get radicalized, and you get radicalized in this manosphere. So I think that's a very important topic for the future, and there should have been so much more research by now. Maybe in the future this will change. Thank you.
We are doing a project at Dissens concerning that.
Sorry, can I add also something that sometimes we ignore or we don't want to talk about is pornography. Not young people, but our boys are learning about not just about sex, but about gender through pornography. So we need to teach our boys that no means no, because what pornography tells them that no means keep insisting. So yeah, it's the manosphere, it's pornography, so many issues, this love at first sign, all the shows that we found so trashy, but that's what our what regular people are watching, and we should be building, not only studying, but providing resources, language to contrast, to fight against this this war.
Yeah, thank you. So, comment.
Hi, I'm very pleased that I hear today you talking about the manosphere. I also absolutely agree that it's a growing movement, especially popular among young men and boys. My personal view that the reason why it's growing is because it somehow addresses some of the needs of the young men, and that those needs are not addressed in the mainstream discourse. So my question to you, if I see you nodding, so I think you agree with me. What are those needs that are not addressed for men and boys, and that are currently mostly addressed in the manosphere? Maybe you have a comment on that.
Yes, I think Jordan Peterson is our answer, as I was mentioning briefly. More than 3 million followers, and he's. I think we shouldn't think that he's just crazy. You know, we need to take him very seriously. Why? He's talking about emotionality, about the lack of contact with men, with other men, things that the mythopoetic movement during the 1780s started working, and they're bringing back that, you know, emotions. So it's really, that's really important for men. When I ask my students to talk about their men in their lives, about the manosphere, and they ask, you know, how you ended up doing that, and they will start. It was a joke. I was starting in TikTok. It was funny, and then without noticing, I was part of the manosphere. You know, so yeah, I think emotionality is something that that is lacking. But as I said, I don't want to stop there, because that is what the framework inclusive masculinity and Anderson and colleagues were doing, and without tackling gender equality. Yes, we need to talk about emotions in the lives of men and intimacy, but also we need to talk about patriarchal dividend. We need to talk about equality, I think.
Thank you very much. I would like to add something also, another aspect. When I look how the male role changed, I would have the impression that the male role changed not because men came together and talked about themselves, but they changed because of the women changed, because of the economic situation that changed and needed other forms of social identities. And what I think is one need is, and is the worst place that it happens, but it's a place where men come together and talk about being, and Gary Parker told it very perfectly, to be authentic men. You know what I mean? And this is somehow the need to get to speak out. So what I would mention is, I see there is a big need for men to come together to speak out openly about how they are, and we both as men and women, we are very gefordert. We should create places to listen to men even if we don't like what they are saying. This is so important, even when it's disturbing, when it's weird, all of our gender blah, 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 keeps popping up, but maybe there's some yellow light or some green light, and then we can agree on that, and then we can get in contact. This is so important that someone feels welcomed to talk about, to be a man. And I think this is a lack that we have in our gender studies and gender things. It's always like a little bit of, we're talking about gender, men are bad. This is somehow the issue I think a lot of men are feeling, even when they try to do it else. Then it's the lack of men's movement that never happened, which is of course not the fault of the feminism, but the fault of men and hegemonial patriarchy. But somehow we have to deal with the problem.
Thank you for your comments. I would also like to add, from my perspective, what I see, what are the other needs that are mostly met in the manosphere for a lot of men. It's on the one part, it's sexual education, which is super lacking in the traditional educational system, and men find answers among other men in those forums and blogs and stuff like that. And the other thing is social skills. Just because a lot of men who join manosphere have social anxiety, and there they find coaching how to get out of that social isolation. It's not the best place, and it's not, some of the advice there is very radical and abusive, but still they still find value there, because there is not enough social skills training programs accessible to men and appropriate to men, men-friendly. They're not men-friendly. And there's actually some good research on PUAs, pickup artists, done in, I don't remember which university, but some university in Canada, done a wonderful research, qualitative, on PUA communities. And they found that there's a lot of social skills learned and emotional coping skills learned in those communities. So it benefits greatly, but we just need to tailor it to be to become radical and not to become abusive. So thank you for your comments.
And I just wanted to add one more study I found lately, because in Austria there is now a discussion coming up about violence in the internet, and that they want to make a paragraph. I think in other countries it is already there, against dick pics. And there was a study done in a US American university. What are the motives from the man sending dick pics? And normally I would also, what I thought is like, it's the feeling of power and control and to provoke, and because we know this a lot about sexual harassment and all this kind of stuff, that is about power and control. But it was the banality that shocked me also, because it was like a quarter of the male persons was about yes, I want to take power and control and kind of aggressive. But the most part of the men just wanted to get back up the same kind of picture from the women. This is such a banality. I mean, sorry when I say these idiots, but it's a banality. And if we look, there's now the German study about boys' health, and it's one figure that shows that 15% of the boys it was about a questionnaire about 3,000 people, and I think about 2,000 men and also women. 15% of the boys visiting on a daily basis pornography sites, and 2% of the girls, so young women. So you see, it's like 1 to 7, but you know where the thinking comes from, and it's the banality. And this is shows that sexual education is so much important, and we have to make our hands somehow dirty to make very, very easy step offers to men and boys. And I thought I wanted to make a project once with the White Ribbon campaign, but we never dared to do it. Like, this is a flirt training, but from the White Ribbon campaign, a campaign against violence against women. But we make flirt trainings for men without saying we are White Ribbon, but just do it. And the people that are involved in making those trainings are then, you can be sure that this is an anti-violent stuff. But we dare to do it because somehow, maybe this is too controversial.
If I can add, Just maybe a comment a little bit offline, but again, when talking about caring masculinities and especially about fathers' discourses and engaging fathers in the childhood, we just recently did research with fathers who took paternal leave and child care leave. And what they reflected, they told that, well, first of all, they are like a generation of the fathers who did not have fathers. I mean, that they had fathers, but they were like shadows that, you know, they were providers for the families. But when they wanted to go for fathersling and to engage more, they found that the discourse is very feminine. I mean, that everything is for mothers, and they could not find their role to be active fathers. And this is also a problem which raises like that we have to think how, on the one hand, we are propagating, but on the other hand, we are not like suggesting anything, and they have to go through to find a way and to get a lot of support actually from both, from women and men. So that's also quite a problem, which sometimes is like overshadowed in the general discourses.
I know we have another question here, but if anybody has a question in the front, please. Okay.
Okay. Hi, I'm Irene, and I work in a research center in Italy, and we have been working on the qualitative research together with Plan within the framework of the Boyhood Equimundos project. And thank you so much for the insights that came out today, because it was so interesting. I had so many thoughts. And what I was wondering also while listening the previous discourse was where do we go from here? Now, what I had in mind for the whole day was how do we reach also what Professor said before about how do we go out of our bubble? And in our work done with the children between 6 and 11. So different ages, but at the same time, mostly primary school. And a series of issues were kind of striking, because I ended up wondering a lot of times, how do we promote caring masculinities in a society that doesn't promote care at all? As to say that I think that's something that I feel that it's urgent to see. It's how do we even reconcile and put together everything that we propose for women's independence by putting forward values like self-determination and affirmation, very values associated to strength, to the fact of even kind of with an aggressive content, affirming themselves over the other, competition, etc. So STEM, etc. How do we put this together with convincing boys that caring is actually an activity worth engaging with, if our society thinks that actually being the most successful and most competitive one is still for men and for women the best thing and the best position you can find yourself into? And at the same time, and this brings together the facts of the performance that Gary Barker was referring to before, which is something, again, that I find very interesting, because in our the children that we met, that we worked with, there was a lot of performance. They were very aware, and the more they were older, and the more they were aware of of gender equality. There are no boys' toys, there are no girls' toys, yes, but I'm not interested into playing with dolls. Or I somehow I have this kind of it's like they give the feeling sometimes that they don't want to buy the whole package of gender equality. So I think that somehow we one way, what you were saying before about how do we revolve around, there are needs that needs to be met. And so this idea that somehow I perform, even children like around 8, 9, 10 years old, they were very good at performing in terms of saying, okay, I think this and this needs to be in a way or in another, but they did not engage actually in activities that it's something that people can do, but I won't. So how do we, do we move out? And I don't know, it's something that, how do we build these opportunities beyond the gender education, an education that is gendered, but that it goes beyond the package, the certain activities that you propose them. Now, how do we go out of that box? That's what I have no idea of how to do. So I'm just asking for more suggestions.
Yeah, thank you, Irene, for your very deep reflection. And like the question, how do we promote caring masculinity in a society that doesn't promote care at all is really key. And I think that like throughout the project, we always said that we need to promote the social value of care, because otherwise there's no way we can promote caring masculinity. So that's a key point, but that's not easy at all, because the surrounding is telling you the opposite. And it is true. I also see a contradiction in a way that we want to promote like empowerment of women, which is of course needed and necessary, but sometimes this translates into competitiveness, a little bit of aggression, and values that are somehow in contradiction with care. So there might be a problem in here. So I don't know if some of you would like to comment.
I'm sorry that I take the microphones off. But it reminds me which, the left side of my heart beats strongly, as you mentioned, is because I studied a lot of critical psychology, and from this tradition, it's always very on the base and a foundation that you always have to discuss things with a view on the economical situation and on capitalism, neoliberalism, all this kind of stuff. And there are good traditions also in feminist tradition, and one very good writer I know is Frigga Haug. I don't know if there are any translations in Italian language. I just know one very, very good book, which is called Die 3 in einem Perspektive, 3 in 1 perspective. And she comes from the tradition of the critical psychology. And what she brings into the 3 in 1 perspective is that for everyone on this planet, and of course from the economical point of view, we should have a good life for everyone on this planet. This should be very important. And she said the 3 in 1 perspective is like when we have from our awoken time, when we are awake, we have 3 parts that we should have time for. One is like for work. One time is for caring about others and doing our social network. And one third part is about recreation, that we do creative stuff and this kind of stuff. And she arguments that with an economical background is very interesting. And also I think the tradition of the critical psychology is very, very good to bring up, and because the mainstream psychology, you won't find any answers, because it's kind of too much individual centered kind of stuff. But we should really to take this in care. And also in the feminist tradition, there are a lot of interesting, of course, you know better than me, writers about that. Frigga Haug. It's Frigga, Frigga. And the second name is Haug, is Haugg, with double G, Frigga Haug. Maybe it's 1 G at the end, maybe 2. It's 1 G, it's 1 G at the end. Too much G's. First time 2 G's, and then it's like UGG, the boot.
We have another question here, but you can add,
Yeah,
Daniel, okay?
on a pedagogical level, I have a very clear perspective, because I address care without addressing caring masculinities. There's a approach in Germany which is called you work on gendered issue, but you don't mention that it's gendered. So you actually work then on care and make care, for example, if you work in a class, visible through cooperation games, or we have some methods where they reflect on care And the one method which works very well in my groups was that actually, especially everybody writes up the activities the caregivers do for them. So all the activities they have, they write on the wall, and usually that shines up the value of caregiving. So they realize what care is actually happening at the moment. So in pedagogy, by just addressing and making care visible, that is already then strengthening caring masculinities. That is one approach. There are some others in the manual we're going to write, but that is one continuation, I think.
And maybe from the advocacy point of view, we could start questioning our politicians, why care is so low paid. This is such an important area, and it is so, I don't know, underestimated and so low paid. So maybe we should change our attitude and also finances to this sphere, which is very important for our society. And without care, we would not survive.
Okay, so one more question here.
So I just wanted to talk about from what I've seen while growing up. Why is there a lack of caring masculinities? I think it's because of really homophobia, which is passed from generation to generation. And I often heard in childhood when a boy showed other boy that he cares or hugged him, and children were saying it's gay, but it was taken as an insult. And it was meant to insult that person and be like, don't do that again. And the important thing that I want to express is, will there be included some courses studying especially about sexual orientation? Will there be talks to children about that, and also teachers, and how they can provide this knowledge about love, which is maybe seen by children different, but not because they think so, but it's just parents showed it like that. So that's my question.
Well, in the trainings I do, I always include sexual and gender diversity, because gender sensitive education is the basis. And from that, I move on to caring masculinities. And in that term, I try to do some sexual orientation as well. So that's how I do pedagogy. I think others do it differently, perhaps.
I like to play my classroom. I ask my students, imagine you are back to a school and you're a very mean person. And so how do you destroy a boy's reputation? And how do you destroy a girl's reputation? And the boy's reputation, you destroy his through his sex orientation. You call him etc. And for a girl, you don't use sex orientation to destroy her reputation. You call it slut, etc. So why we're using this sexual reputation and sex orientation differently for both? I think that's for me is a link for gender and sexuality. We cannot talk about gender without tackling sexuality. So thanks for bringing that.
And one last thing that happens on big media now at the moment is, of course, the football World Championship, and so it's perfectly made for working with boys. You just have to show the love sign, on the, I don't know what the word is. You know what I mean? You show a picture of it, and you have the discussion already there. So that's it.
Yeah, so thanks a lot for your comments and insights. I think it was a really incredibly rich panel. So we will continue to reflect on this issue and also maybe come up with topics for future projects together, hopefully. So yeah, I think we can close now, and I'll give it to Monica. Thank you.
Thanks to the panel and Erica. I don't know about you, everyone, but to me, it feels like we started 15 minutes ago and now we're about to close, which is weird. Time runs differently in these rooms, doesn't it?
It does. It really does. Because there's no sunlight. We can't see the sunlight here.
We walked in and it was kind of dark. And I think by the time we leave, it will be kind of dark again. It's Lithuania in the end of November. So, but it's bright here. So that's a good sign.
Yeah. And we are trying to make here the closing remarks, which we are going to do. I'm first of all very thankful that we could be here and could be in that place. And I think we say thank you at the very end to the people here. And I just want to say, please have a look on our website at EcaRoM.eu, because all the stuff we have there is in English, nearly all uploaded. And well, if you have any ideas, any comments, please let us know. And we, of course, we are thinking about how to continue, how this project can be sustainable and just not only project. And we are very open for your recommendations.
So today in total, we had 45 people here in the room and 43 people online, which is almost equal, actually. Yeah. And that those numbers almost held up for the entire day, which is a very, very pleasant surprise. I think in terms of what we've been discussing for the entire day, what struck me was that we want men that are caring, kind, and empathetic. I think we all agree on that. We see, Gary was showing a research they did that boys want to be men who are kind, caring, and empathetic. We just seem to forget that somewhere along the way. Like we agree upon it and then it just slips out of our hands. I think another thing that we sometimes forget to mention is that men are kind, caring, and empathetic. And sometimes in the situations where we would least expect that, when the war broke out in Ukraine because Russia invaded, some men took up arms, which we would expect from a traditional point of masculinity, right? But some men took their cars and started evacuating vulnerable people and vulnerable animals, which is very caring, right? So even in contexts where we would least expect it, we have examples of caring masculinities in practice. And it's like what we had our last question about love and boys showing love to other boys. Do you think, Daniel, that it has to do with the fact that we kind of lose touch of what love is?
Yes.
Thank you.
Definitely. And especially self-love, because what happens in a gender-biased world, that masculinity outsources love to femininity. And if we can encourage men to experience love and share their love more, I think that's one of the best things we can do. And I quote here, actually, I thought about quoting Bell Hooks. She wrote a book, a lot of very good books about love, and one book about man masculinity and love. And I can really refer to that, where she writes as well. It's the lack of love which is missing in men, which is there. It's there when they are children. It's and they are caring, but it goes through masculinity away.
Do we show love now? By inviting everybody who worked on this project?
I guess, but before we do that, I just want to say a warm thank you for Monica, who did a brilliant facilitation today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You are all a lovely crowd. It's easy to moderate with such a lovely crowd and a bunch of presenters that all stick to time. I didn't have to look meaningfully at anyone. Everybody did great. Thank you.
And before we invite the whole team, I would like to invite the Center for Equality Advancement. Everybody who works for the Center for Equality Advancement, come please here, because you were the people who were organizing this whole event, and which is really, really a big thing. To organize an international conference hybrid, you know, not only here, but hybrid. So okay, come here, everybody, to the camera. And thank you so much for what you did. Without you, it wouldn't have been possible to have such a wonderful conference and get everybody here together in this place. Okay, we do another. So yeah, that's us. And now I'd like to show everybody from our project, from EcaRoM, who worked in our project, that you can see who actually contributed to our project and hasn't been on the stage, so that you see how many people actually worked in our project. So yeah. I squeeze in here. So that's us also. You have a picture. So that's so you see there's more people working in the project which are not here, but as you see, it's like nearly 18 people max, plus or minus, which are caring for masculinities now, promoting caring masculinities.
And I think the final thank you should go to the 3 caring men right there at the back who are taking care of us in terms of technical support today. Thank you.
Thank you. So then we close the conference. We wish you a wonderful evening and see you soon here or there, online or in the real world. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you for spending the day with us. Have a nice evening.